He opened his eyes wide when the person beside him called his name, Elric Melvinger. The voice steady but the information horrifying. He was suffering from a disease called magical obstruction. Unlike ordinary illnesses, his body was afflicted by a rare condition in which mana could not flow freely, and mana is the essential energy source for mages. Elric sat silently in a room of the Royal Magical Hospital, listening as the doctor rambled on. Despite all our attempts on your body, I'm afraid we are at a loss. He hung his head waiting for the verdict on his future. Unfortunately, he couldn't use magic. Just as he returned to Eden Academy, he heard Hazer complaining, "Elric, are you listening to me? Hello?" He hurriedly blurted out, "Sorry, sister, what did you just say?" She continued to express her worry, "How's your body? What did the doctors say? Did they find a cure? If you need more money, I can only..." Elric awkwardly cut in, "Sister, calm down, I'm not a child anymore, you don't need to worry so much, I'll recover soon." Hazer immediately retorted, "How could I not worry about my only remaining relative?" He had no choice and tried to distract her. "Ah, someone's calling me, I'll call you back." The prolonged beep let him breathe a sigh of relief. Elric gritted his teeth and muttered with a heavy heart that he couldn't tell her the truth, that he might never be able to return home. Noise rose from outside the academy doors. "What? What's wrong with your grades? Damn those cursed wind mages, I never missed class and still got a D." They looked at the all-A grade sheet and kept getting more outrageous. How could Melvinger be so different? "I knew it would be like this, how does he get such high grades in those subjects?" The commotion lingered in the hall. "Look at your scores, they seem just like Melvinger's to me. Shut up or I'll shut your mouth for you now." Elric's brows nearly met as he voiced his suppressed annoyance. "Tisk, failed again." Indeed, with a full sheet of FS, it would be an insult to his classmates if he didn't fail. This was the 4th time. According to Academy rules, 4 failures mean. Elric silently analyzed his fate in his head, expulsion. If expelled like this, I won't be able to bring honor to my family. He had tried his best to study to stay here. He had done everything he could and learned all he could. As a result, he mastered all the knowledge the Academy required, and of course Elric topped every theoretical exam. Above all, he wasn't arrogant, but he believed he was exceptional compared to others. Not just in intellect, but his ability to detect and understand mana was also deeper than others. For a mage, going from knowing theory to understanding mana is a wonderful thing they all desire. Yet every class taught how to control it. Absorb the mana currents around you from the air and gather them into your heart. That is what we call a magic circle. Even if Elric had the ability everyone wanted, so what? Whenever he attended class he was surrounded by jeers. "Why is that senior stuck in a freshman class? Ha ha ha, unbelievable, a mage can't form a magic circle." Even his professor stepped in to counsel him. "Why don't you give up magic and become a scholar? I'll speak well of you to the headmaster." Elric silently cursed inwardly. "This damned magical blockage means I can't use magic. At best I can only be a magic scholar, and I can't bring honor to the Melvinger family as a mere professor." He unconsciously looked up at the clear sky. Elric stood before the giant statue and whimpered, "Oh sir." He was the hero of the demon war. He himself possessed superior stellar mage abilities. None other than the legend Ustin Melvinger. He had beautiful green eyes and extraordinary skill. The Empire's top magic academy was Eden Academy. Elric's mood sank to the bottom. "If I'm expelled from here, it means I've destroyed the pride of the Melvinger family with my own hands." The whispering still lingered in his ear. Just thinking that guy was the first headmaster's grandson. He pressed his lips together as they mocked him. Truly the disgrace of the Melvinger family. Everyone laughed loudly at that notion, treating it as gospel. Someone even maliciously speculated, "When do you think a magical royal line will die out?" They finished and tried to flee, but Elric wouldn't allow it and called out to them, "Hey, you lot. First-year elemental magic students, right?" They instinctively answered and turned around. He stepped forward to the confusion of the 2 underclassmen. "Do you know an assistant professor named Sean? He's very friendly." Elric fixed his gaze on the nameplate on the other's chest. "Let's see." He curled the corner of his mouth and asked a simple, cruel question. "What are your names?" Elric jumped down in front of them and taunted, "Let me see, I don't think you can stand that damn Sean teasing you anymore, can you?" They were bold when gossiping but scattered like rats when confronted. Truly despicable. Elric sighed wearily. Then he glanced to the side. The statue of Ustin still stood tall. He continued to scold himself inwardly. "Sir, even if father were still here." "No, focus. This is not the place to be weak, not with this accursed body." Elric suddenly clenched his fist, resolving that he would break free from it. But when he returned to his little den he stammered and complained, "No, it can't be." "Oh," Elric murmured, gripping the papers, "the Academy's first report." He spat inwardly again, "Damn it, there's nothing about magical blockage in it." Suddenly a blinding flash of light swept across his eyes, catching Elric's attention. Sean charged like a whirlwind and pinned him to the ground. The students around them were so terrified by the violence their jaws dropped. Elric trembled, rubbing the back of his head. Without thinking he shouted, "Who the hell told Sean to leisurely come and soothe this defective piece right here? Damn it, what did you just say?" Sean gritted his teeth and demanded angrily, "You dared to use my name again, didn't you?" Knowing he was cornered, Elric flipped his attitude faster than flipping a page. "Oh, is that my noble brother Sean Narester?" He refused to react and only angrily retorted, "I told you not to use my name to scare the freshmen, didn't I?" He prudently sat down, clapped his hands and said, "Is that so? I see. Since it's a special occasion, let me buy you a drink. Why don't you use a nose-repairing charm?" Sean slammed the table and protested, "I'd rather die than do that bastard." "Did I speak too harshly?" Elric narrowed his eyes and tried to manipulate his friend's feelings. "Come closer, that's why I told you never to do that." Seeing him fidgeting, he involuntarily called the other's name, Sean. After Elric's family fell, the magic tower was led by 6 royal hexagram houses. Sean was a member of the hexagram, the son of the Narester family. And right after he graduated from the academy, he immediately became a professor, an elite member. Although he chose a path opposite to Elric's, he remained the only one who stood by him. Sean pulled out the stack of papers and asked bewilderedly, "What is this? Why are you staring at me?" Without waiting for an answer, he shoved them forward. Elric stared at the dense lines of text and felt dizzy. "What is this?" Reading the title carefully made him suspicious. "Diamond Dragon, an exploration plan." Elric skimmed it and sucked in a breath. "Why are you giving this to me?" Sean patiently explained his intention. "Although this is an ancient species still being studied, we've recently discovered one of their nests. I want you to join this expedition." He snatched up the papers and shouted, "What?" Elric's mind tangled instantly. An ancient dragon species that should have been extinct, and they found a dragon lair said to be the source of magic. Sean smiled with complete satisfaction. "If you find an artifact, do you think the Academy will overlook expulsion? Look at the map, and it's because of your sincerity." Elric devoured the route on the map, his thoughts rode a roller coaster like stock charts. "Amazing, it's not just about expulsion, maybe the dragon lair could cure my magical blockage. It's pointless. Even if such a thing exists, the headmaster will just take it." "Wait!" he exclaimed loudly and slapped the draft onto the table. Sean recoiled against the chair, timidly asking, "What's with the sudden bang?" Elric said nothing, but his mind churned. "Why didn't I think of this? This is the chance heaven gave me." He moved his lips and let out a clear, almost melodious laugh. Then Elric seemed to go mad, clutching his face and laughing maniacally. Sean swore outright at this idiot. What the hell is wrong with him? He ignored the insults and pointed at the circled spot on the map. "Sean." Elric adopted a confident air and then dropped the bombshell. "There's no nest here." He stood up, pointed to a location on the map, and said, "The dragon lair won't be here." Sean was stunned. "What?" He quickly scanned around, his face showing alertness. The person sitting at the table behind Elric was still engrossed in a book. Sean glanced back. The two at the next table were chatting happily. No one was paying attention over here. Sean pressed his lips together, cold sweat poured down like a stream. Fortunately no one heard. Thinking that, Sean leaned close to Elric, covered his mouth, and whispered, "Watch your mouth. Do you know how many professors are involved? You're challenging powerful people all at once." Elric seemed unconcerned. He shrugged casually and asked, "So?" Sean, a little annoyed, glared at him. "I'll smash your head in right now." Elric grinned, eyes curved. "Calm down, my friend, I'm the son of the Narester family." He forced a wry smile and sighed, "Or at least hear me out." Sean frowned, grew serious, and used magic to form a small matrix on the map. The matrix suddenly emitted a blinding blue light. The next moment the blue light spread, engulfing both Elric's and Sean's seats. The matrix transported Elric and Sean to another space. From above, the spot Elric had pointed to on the map appeared before them. There was a long, seemingly bottomless fissure in the ground. Sean spoke up. The crack formed where two ley currents collided. Rays of every color spilled from the rift. Sean could see them with the naked eye and continued, a huge amount of mana was gushing from the crack. Sean watched them for a moment then added, with this much it must have been accumulating for at least 100,000 years, no wonder he suspected a dragon lair here. Elric stood on the edge of the fissure looking down, then asked the Sean beside him, what are the three principles of mana flow? Sean folded his arms and glared at Elric, are you kidding me? Elric nudged him with his elbow and laughed, of course you know the basics, right, assistant professor? Sean's face bulged with veins and irritation, but he still patiently answered, from high to low. Looking at the bottomless chasm before them, Sean continued, from wide to narrow. The scene suddenly shifted. Elric found himself standing inside an ice-filled cavern. Sean glanced at him, his face showing annoyance. From hot. A chill from the cavern spread everywhere. Sean's figure gradually blurred as his voice echoed in Elric's ear, finishing the remaining words, to cold. The next moment Elric and Sean appeared in a vast void. Elric said confidently, with those principles anyone would be certain the dragon lair is at this location. But Elric pointed in one direction where a streak of golden light appeared. Because molten lava very hot flows through that rift, mana doesn't accumulate there, so dragons cannot live there. Sean frowned, disbelief written across his face. No, that's impossible. Where Elric had pointed the lava was bubbling and surging. From the mountain's summit streams of molten lava erupted, that was Mount Akron. At the mountain's base the molten flows pooled and wound down toward the lowlands. Elric looked down from above, that's right. The Akron volcano's lava runs beneath the continental shelf. In an instant the matrix dissolved and Elric and Sean reappeared where they had started. Sean looked at Elric and asserted, we recorded a dragon's mana signature in this area. How can the lair not be there? Elric propped his chin and said nonchalantly, I never said there's no lair. Hearing that, Sean grew even more puzzled. What? Elric curled his lips in a smile, there's definitely a lair. And with that he pointed to a spot on the map and said, here, inside Karagul Cave. And as Elric had guessed, there really was a cave where he pointed. Closer inspection revealed a golden dragon carved above the cave entrance. Elric imagined a place filled with countless priceless shelves of magical tomes, and vast treasures of piled gold coins and precious gems. He was certain it was all there. After that conversation Sean went to a door, ruffled his hair in confusion and swore, how do I report this to my superiors? Sean tried to compose himself. He raised a hand to knock, then froze. Sean worried and broke into a cold sweat, thinking to himself, should I play dumb? If I anger the headmaster I'll be expelled, but what if Elric's right, then that fellow. Sean paced the corridor undecided, unwilling to knock on the door. Suddenly he heard a noise and turned toward the sound. Not far away Elric was intensely practicing magic. Sean, surprised at the sight, said, Elric, why are you alone in the training room? Elric trembled all over. Thrusting his hand forward as if trying to cast a spell, he seemed not to hear Sean, muttering non-stop, I must master healing and dispelling to become number one and honor my family at any cost. After a while Elric was drenched in sweat, his face darkened and veins bulged. Damn it, magical blockage. Sean, standing not far away, suddenly curled his lip into a smile and thought to himself, that bastard, he can cure a magical blockage. He slapped his cheeks to wake himself up and said, if that's a friend of his, I have to help him. In a room piled with books someone suddenly spoke up. Humph. The person held the newspaper attentively, still muttering under his breath. You mean? He set the paper down, revealing a face full of displeasure, then angrily asked the person before him, is my research report wrong? The speaker was the headmaster of Uston Academy, Barracks. Sean faced him, sweating profusely and stammering, no, that's not it, but I wanted your opinion because it might. Barracks suddenly cut Sean off. Sean, I don't know why you reached that conclusion. If you can't persuade me. As he spoke he swung his leg, the next moment Sean was suddenly enveloped in a terrifying crimson mana. Barracks emphasized, even if you are the son of the Norester family. His eyes flashed a cold light, his face dark as he warned Sean, I will not let this go. Sensing the overwhelming mana surrounding him, Sean broke out in a cold sweat, thinking, the mana is too strong. This is the power of a 7th-rank mage. Then the mana around Sean suddenly cracked and shattered. Eric suddenly flung the door wide and smiled confidently as he looked inside. The remaining mana in the room dissipated. Sean turned to the newcomer and exclaimed in surprise, Elric. Seeing him, he couldn't contain his excitement and shouted, are you crazy? What are you doing here? Elric bowed politely. Hello, headmaster. Pardon me for bursting in like this. He stood to the side, sweating cold in his place. Barrick stared at Elric and chuckled, "Oh ho, look at him." Recognizing him, he spoke up, "Elric Melvinger." Is the assistant professor basing his reasoning on your input?" Elric casually admitted it. "Yes, that's right." Barracks glanced at his wristwatch and smirked. "I commend your insight and clear perception. It's hard to believe a student could think of that, but there's no evidence, it's just speculation, yes?" Elric narrowed his eyes in feigned surprise. "What? This is so basic even a 3-year-old would know it. You still need evidence." Barrick's expression darkened as he stared at Elric. Elric met his gaze without a hint of fear. Sean stood there trembling, tears streaming, forcing a smile while thinking, "Is this guy insane? Why are you provoking him? Damn it, what are you doing here to help me? You're more like here to get someone killed for you." Barrick suddenly clutched his head and bowed over the desk. "The basics," he muttered. When he raised his head he couldn't help but laugh loudly. "I'm at a loss for words, I can only laugh. A weakling who can't even condense mana." Elric, hearing that, calmly asked, "Do you mean my hypothesis is wrong?" Barrick straightened and looked at him. "Pfft. Well. Some do get lucky, I suppose." He kept ranting, calling them a bunch of trash who flapped their mouths without knowing their place. Elric smirked faintly. Barracks emphasized, "Like you, for instance." Elric said nothing. The light from outside cast a long shadow across his back, making him look a little lonely. Barracks raised an eyebrow and tapped his temple. As a professor, I can't simply ignore a student's opinion." He suddenly glanced at Elric's neck and changed his tone. "Ah, that's right." Barracks smiled darkly and proposed, "Why not make a bet with me?" Eric seemed interested. He asked, "A bet? What kind?" Barracks replied, "I will arrange everything you need to form an expedition team, and notify the finance department of what you'll require." It sounds enticing, but of course everything has a price. Barracks stressed that if you fail, thinking of the thing worn on Elric's neck, the Melvinger family heirloom will become mine. That priceless treasure is the trump card that could let Elric turn the tables. He smiled confidently, the headmaster's final words echoing in his mind, "The Melvinger heirloom will be mine." A magic carriage rolled through the crowded street, cries and shouts spilling from inside. "Aren't you frustrated?" Inside the carriage, while Sean trembled with anger, Elric calmly held a book and read intently. "You're tearing my ears out, be gentler," he said, smiling with upturned eyes. "It's fine. They said they won't interfere if I find the dragon's lair anyway." As soon as he finished, Sean suddenly snatched the book from Eric's hands. Elric looked bewildered and tried to grab it back. "Hey, this is the good part. Don't snatch my book." Sean's face turned as black as a pan and he growled angrily, "What if you fail?" He shouted excitedly, "If your prediction is wrong, the family heirloom will be taken away." "You idiot, that pendant." Elric bowed his head to look at the pendant hanging on his chest. The pendant flashed with a silver light. He heard Sean shout in his ear, only to be bestowed upon the head of the Melvinger family. Elric seemed unfazed. He waved his hand and laughed, "That guy always wanted this pendant." Sean put his hands on his hips and pointed at him, scolding fiercely, "You can still smile. Don't you understand the situation?" Elric suddenly cut him off. "Thanks, by the way." He grinned with upturned eyes. "At least you've always been by my side." Sean held his face in frustration. "Ha, you know my life will be ruined if we don't find that lair, right? So what's the plan?" Elric finally sat up straight and said with a smile, "My friend, do you really think Elric Melvinger would accept such a hardship just because of a threat?" Sean blinked, still not understanding what he meant. "What?" Elric suddenly bared his teeth in a sly grin. "If he dares to covet the Melvinger heirloom, he'll at least have to risk his life for it." Sean frowned and stared into Elric's eyes, sweat suddenly beaded on his face. "I almost forgot this guy has 2 nicknames." Thinking of Elric's tearful, pitiful face, Sean mentally added one, the shame of the Melvinger family. The other was the terrifying, insane visage of Elric, the most fearsome of the Melvinger clan. Sean fell silent as he watched Elric sitting before him. For a moment neither of them spoke. Elric sat opposite Sean with a crazed expression. Sean bit his lip, breaking out in a cold sweat. He was at it again, when Sean was still an apprentice he didn't even want to recall this incident. Back then he was sweating profusely, frowning and yelling. Standing opposite him was a young teenager who clenched his teeth and roared all the more fiercely. 7 years earlier, everyone queued in the mana condensation training hall and debated heatedly about the size of their mana. One of them refused to accept it and said, "Mine is bigger." Elric was only 15 then, curled up in a corner behind them with his head bowed low. Just then someone suddenly mentioned him. "Are you sure you're really a Melvinger?" He heard it and looked up at them. A group of students appeared before Elric. Rivern condensed his mana and looked down at him. "Even the famed Lord Melvinger can't do this, huh?" He sneered with contempt and mocked, "Maybe your head of house picked you up from some corner." The students behind him burst into laughter. They laughed in chorus. "Stop it. Ridiculous." Elric lowered his head, lips moving as if to say something, but he chose silence and wondered to himself, "Am I not unlucky?" After Rivern and his group turned to leave, Elric slowly stood up. He suddenly reached out and took something round before him. He already had his answer inside. Of course. The next instant, Elric unexpectedly swung the orb and struck Rivern at the nape. The two students accompanying him, startled by the sound, whipped their heads around. Elric kept his lips pressed and glowered without saying a word. He thought to himself, "But it's unlucky for those fools." The orb in Elric's hand was still smeared with blood. Rivern now lay collapsed on the ground. The two students with him panicked, calling, "Rivern, wake up." At Eden Academy, during the disciplinary hearing, Elric faced the crowd waiting to judge him and calmly spoke, "That brat from a Viscount family dared to slander me, the head of the ducal house." He looked at them and said, "Therefore I punished him according to the Empire's laws." Any problem with that? Those at the disciplinary hearing huddled together and whispered. Sean folded his arms eagerly, anticipating the outcome. Rivern's parents were stunned and astonished. Elric's gaze was utterly resolute. He didn't feel he had done anything wrong. Yet in the end Elric was suspended under Academy law. All students are equal before the rules. Elric turned and left the disciplinary hearing. He gave a cold, mirthless smile, and after that day no one dared touch him again. Back in the present, Sean cupped his face in deep frustration. He suddenly glanced down. The next second, Sean jumped up and shouted, "Hey, are you crazy?" Elric waved it off as if nothing happened. "I told you not to shout anymore, watch your blood pressure." The hand holding Sean's book trembled uncontrollably as he yelled, "That's a forbidden book. Are you out of things to read?" Elric rubbed his head and grinned innocently, "Exactly. If I'm discovered, I'll be skewered on a spit." Sean returned the book to him, frowning in annoyance. "You're really crazy." Elric cheerfully took the book. Sean then looked at him seriously and asked, "What do you intend to use the Beast King body enhancement technique for?" Elric was a bit absent-minded for a moment and replied, "I'm just wondering if this can cure my magical blockage." Elric thought of the battle with the Beast King when the Beast people invaded the Empire with their legions. "We struggled because that technique enhanced their physical power. When the war ended, the technique vanished because the Empire drove out all the Beast people. They even built walls to keep them out, preventing them from crossing the barriers." Sean frowned and said, "Scholars failed to recreate that technique." Elric sat opposite him, flipping the book nonchalantly. "I've reconstructed it, but I'm not sure how it will alter the body." Hearing this, Sean couldn't help exclaiming in shock, "You recreated it?" He looked pale with astonishment. "I'm so shocked I might burst my heart." "Sir Elric, do as you please." Just then, the carriage they were riding in suddenly shook violently. Elric rubbed his sore head angrily and stuck his head out. "What's going on? Why has the carriage stopped?" Sean, curious, followed him out. At that moment a group of people suddenly approached, greeting Elric, "Long time no see." Elric glanced at them. "I didn't expect to run into you lot." Seeing Rivern's group come up to him, Elric couldn't help but ask, "What are you doing here?" Rivern smirked, "Why?" "Because I care a lot about my classmates." He is now a senior researcher at the Varix Research Institute. Sean couldn't contain his anger and lunged forward, "You bastard." Rivern's men froze and recoiled. "What's the matter?" One of them hurriedly explained, "The director requested we come assist." Elric stared at them. "Is that so?" The people before him smiled as if nothing were wrong, though their intentions were malicious. Elric growled, "You're too kind. I told you I didn't need assistance." Sean leaned in and whispered to Elric, you feel that, right? How many are hiding mana? Elric replied softly, now that's a true director of Varix. He suddenly loosened his collar so Sean could see inside and said, don't worry, I've prepared for this. Sean asked in surprise, how did you get that? Elric smirked but said nothing. In Barrick's office, his face darkened and he trembled with anger, shouting, what? He obtained the breath of Gehenna and the celestial Thunder King armor. The man before him broke into a sweat, you told us to assist him as best we could, sir. Barrick shouted furiously, you bastard. The things Elric possesses, the breath of Gehenna, the sealed flame orb that can burn a target to ashes, and the celestial Thunder King armor that resists both physical attacks and elemental magic, just thinking of those two treasures gives me a headache. Do you think lending a 4th-tier magic weapon to a student that can turn a town to dust is acceptable, and it's him of all people? Barracks massaged his bald head to ease the ache and muttered, I'm going crazy, get out, I don't want to see your face anymore. The man before him fell silent, embarrassed and saying nothing further. The next instant he shouted, yes, sir, and bolted away like the wind. Barracks glanced at the report on his desk and muttered that if the other candidates learned of this it would cause big trouble. Suddenly, as if thinking of something, his eyes brightened. Wait, he said, grabbing the stack of papers beside him. If that kid truly finds the dragon's lair, Barracks immediately calmed himself. Not bad. I suspect that bloodline is more than just rumor. After saying that he slammed the paper onto the desk. I should replace this incompetent research team, they call themselves scholars yet don't even know the basics. Then Barracks realized he'd spoken out of turn and froze, the next moment he quickly backtracked, no. Barracks curled his lips into a smile, revealing his bright red tongue. Thanks to those fools, I'll have a chance to seize that pendant. Barracks' expression turned extremely sinister, once he had it, he'd be sure to become the next prime minister. With that he immediately crushed the paper in his hand. A terrifying layer of mana suddenly enveloped him. Even if you win the bet, he murmured, it only counts if you can return alive. Elric kept flipping through the book, strange incantations whispering in his ear. Riven's group folded their arms across their chests and stared intently ahead. Sean closed his eyes tightly and focused on reciting the incantation. He became enveloped in a matrix that emitted a blazing golden light. The orb in his hand shone dazzlingly as he shouted, locate mana. Immediately the golden light spread wider, and everyone watched him intently. Suddenly someone trembled and cried out, look, not far away, a pillar of blazing golden light is shooting up into the sky. Sean looked that way in astonishment and murmured, Elric was right. Riven widened his eyes, unable to believe it, is it really here? Elric closed the book and calmly said, I knew it. The next moment he turned to everyone and shouted, our whole team must move quickly before the pillar of light burns out. As soon as he finished, Sean immediately wrapped an arm around his waist. And without hesitation he pulled Elric and suddenly surged toward the pillar of light, holding on tight. In a flash the two of them were far ahead of Riven's group. Riven's people watched their figures in amazement, mouths agape. Riven couldn't help shouting, hey, what about us? Time passed in a blur before Riven's group finally managed to reach the mountain. Riven bent over, gasping as if he might collapse, muttering, please wait for us, we're exhausted. When they looked up, surprise appeared on their faces. Huh? What the? They saw the golden pillar before them fading. The group panicked and stammered, there's nothing here. They began to argue, there's nothing here, not even a cave. Didn't you say the entrance would be here? I knew this Melvinger always brings bad outcomes. Riven rubbed his chin. It's fine now, he sneered quietly, I could step forward and pry open your skull to see what's inside, right? Someone should pay for this mistake. At that moment Elric suddenly shouted, startling Riven. Sean, look, Elric called out, can you make a big hole here? Sean smiled confidently, leave it to me. He gathered mana around his arms. Then Sean immediately began chanting and unleashed mana that expanded outward. The mana around him erupted. He murmured as his eyes flared brightly. Boom! A great explosion sounded as the ground beneath the pillar was shattered by Sean, sending dirt and rocks flying. As the earth broke, Sean's magic suddenly emitted a golden light. The ground collapsed with a roar and the light spread ever wider. The next instant that golden light, like a volcanic eruption, pierced through the soil and plunged downward. Looking at the large hole just created, Elric said nonchalantly, found it. The trailing group stood dumbfounded, what? How is this possible? Another person suddenly spoke up, in the worst case there could be a dragon. Before he could finish he let out a loud gasp. A beam of blue light suddenly enveloped the whole area. Riven's followers cried out in shock, what the? They gritted their teeth and tried to withstand the pressure of the enormous mana flow. Some turned pale and stared ahead in stunned fear. Then Elric suddenly spread his arms wide as a signal to them. He looked straight ahead and said, "Don't move. That's just compressed mana escaping from when I made the hole." Elric put on a serious face and said, "Everyone, get inside." At the mouth of the deep hole the group saw Elric descend into the cavern and panicked, shouting, "Elric, wait for us." Everyone followed Elric. Inside the cavern the stalactites seemed to glow. Rivern, among the group, rubbed his hands and said, "Huh. Why is it so cold here? Even after using spells it still doesn't feel any warmer." While walking, Elric suddenly froze. Sean, beside him, asked confusedly, "What's wrong? Do you see something?" A huge question mark formed in Rivern's mind. Not only did I feel a chill down my spine, Sean blew on his freezing hands and said, "Maybe you're cold too, I think I'm getting sick." No one noticed the pendant on Elric's neck suddenly emit a silver light. After a moment, the team sent to assist suddenly moved forward eagerly. Elric and Sean followed slowly. Elric murmured, "Perhaps you were right." Inside the cave appeared a monster with blazing red eyes. Its arms were pinned straight to the wall. In the black night its red eyes shone all the more clearly. It grinned to reveal pearly white teeth and, in a gloomy tone, said, "So you're here." Finally, one of the men trailing behind Elric gaped at the scene. "Wow." Sean was equally surprised and impressed. Before them stood a huge door with a golden dragon carved on it. The followers stared in astonishment, stammering, "Is this a door?" A middle-aged man in the group shouted, "The strong should gather quickly." Rivern seemed eager to try. "Everyone, push it together." A young man with long hair suddenly conjured a red flame in his palm and suggested, "Why not break it with magic?" The man beside him replied, "What did you say?" "Of course." Just as they were about to act, someone suddenly shouted, "Stop." Everyone, puzzled, turned to look at the speaker. Elric sighed and pointed to a corner. "Can't you see the dragon seal on this door, you idiots?" He stared at the door where a dragon-shaped press and carvings were set. "And the strange runes, I have no idea what would happen if I tamper with it." Rivern, a little annoyed, ground his teeth and said, "Sure, you're always so clever, I get it, you always have to show off." Scowling at Elric as he negotiated with the others on the other side, "So when we try to open it, stay clear of the door and—" At that moment Rivern suddenly noticed the button beside the door. He sat down to examine it. "What's this made of?" Elric, on the other side, kept instructing the group, "First we need to figure out how to break the seal." He turned to Sean, "Do you have any notes on it?" Elric looked around. "Make sure no one acts on their own from now on, I don't know what could happen if." Just then Rivern suddenly reached to touch the button on the door. "Is it gold? What is it made of?" Elric shouted urgently, "Don't touch it." Rivern had just touched the button when he turned his head. "What the?" The next moment a golden light suddenly burst from beneath his feet. The spot where he sat exploded, flinging him backward. He screamed, "Ah! What is this?" Elric gritted his teeth and had just finished speaking when the characters on the door suddenly shifted. The people below froze. "What's happening to the door?" Elric shouted urgently, "Careful, it's a trap." No sooner had he finished than magic struck the man behind Elric, sending him flying backward. Everyone stared in amazement at the burst of magic erupting before them. Elric shouted, "Shields up." Everyone reacted quickly and raised their shields, which saved them from those explosions. The crowd panicked and screamed, "What's happening?" Sean, sweating profusely, yelled, "Elric, what do we do now?" "Do something." Elric stared at the note before him and replied loudly, "I'll try to decipher this record first." The crowd began to shout, "I don't want to die, don't leave us, save us." Elric squatted on the ground to calm himself. "Stay calm." He forced his mind to focus, like a situational response test. Elric put pen to paper. "Right, just imagine this is a situational response test." His gaze grew determined. "I'll find the solution, I trust myself like I always do." Elric's writing speed increased. One person in the crowd couldn't withstand the barrage, his shield shattered and the attack struck him directly. He screamed. Elric tried to remain calm and continued recording the decipherment. Sean held his shield up to protect those behind him as groans of pain kept rising. "My arm, help me." As Elric's writing accelerated, his hand suddenly touched the round button on the door. He began to murmur the incantation, silently urging himself to add just a little more, as long as he made no mistakes. Elric squeezed his eyes shut. He gritted his teeth and thought, "Come on, please." As if answering his plea, the magic attacks finally ceased. Everyone was astonished. They stopped. Sean collapsed to the ground exhausted, staring up at the sky. "I thought I was dead." Elric hurried over to him. "Sean, are you okay?" Sean looked at him. Elric smiled faintly, "Thanks to you I'm still alive." The crowd buzzed, "Wait, the wounds will heal quickly, that attack cost me some lifespan." "Rivern, you're okay, right?" Sean glanced at Elric. "That bastard, he's something else." Elric rubbed his chin proudly, "Heh, that's my power, you bastard." Before the group could catch their breath, the spot where they stood was suddenly enveloped by a layer of blue mana. One of them looked surprised, "Huh." The next moment something lunged toward the group. A beam of blue magical light concentrated into a spell and struck a man's arm, destroying it. The next second he collapsed before everyone's eyes. His body slowly crumpled to the ground. Panic spread. "Is he okay? What's happening?" Elric widened his eyes in shock. Ice magic spells suddenly began to form in increasing numbers. They dived down from above toward where Elric stood. He looked up and exclaimed in astonishment, "Damn it." At the critical moment Sean suddenly used his shield to block the ice spell's attack, nearly unable to hold it entirely. The group quickly raised their shields to brace themselves. Elric hurriedly took out paper and pen, gritting his teeth. "Damn it, again." Elric focused on calculations and muttered in some strange language. He wrote and read without pause. Sean, barely holding on, shouted urgingly, "Elric, hurry up." Elric's eyes lit up as he read the runes faster and faster. A strange image slowly reflected in his eyes. Elric suddenly found himself somewhere else, facing a giant dragon spreading its wings across the sky, the source of magic. Elric snapped his eyes open. They were radiant. He shouted, "Sean, haste." Sean, meanwhile, was desperately holding off the attack from above. He used magic to hasten Elric toward the gate. The blue magic coiling around Elric's ankles began to dissipate. Sean glanced at him, sweat pouring, gritting his teeth, "I can't hold this much longer, it's too hard." As soon as he finished speaking, the ice magic blasted through, slicing Elric's flesh. He coughed, let the blood flow, and pressed on with fierce determination. Elric ignored everything and silently invoked an armed layer of brilliant golden magic that immediately enveloped him. Rivern stared in astonishment, unable to believe it. Could the ice magic on the other side have slammed straight into Elric's stomach? Elric threw himself forward regardless. His outer garments were torn away, revealing the breastplate beneath. Rivern shouted in surprise, "The Celestial Thunder King armor? How does he have that?" Elric's hand finally touched the round button on the door. He shut his eyes, gritted his teeth, and chanted inwardly, "This time for sure." Ice magic thundered down at them, aiming for where Sean was valiantly holding the shield. With a whoosh, a huge block of ice hurtled to within inches of Sean. Elric snapped his eyes open, staring wide. The ice magic was just then dispelled by Elric, shattering and vanishing into the air. Watching the mana fade, Elric muttered, "The trap's gone." Elric sat down on the ground, squinting and smiling, "Phew, I thought I was going to die, my fancy clothes are all torn." Sean, struggling, turned his head to look at him and smiled. The survivors showed relief and joy on their faces after overcoming the ordeal. The door before them suddenly creaked open a crack of light. Then the door gradually swung open. The interior light dazzled Elric. He shouted, "The whole expedition team, tend to the wounded and move inside." Elric raised his brow and looked ahead with delight. The place held countless bookcases and mountains of gold coins and enormous jewels, a truly vast treasure. The explorers, astonished, entered the treasure chamber. There were so many magical artifacts. "Look over there at that's armor made from dragon scales." Elric stared at the floating shelves of books. "Amazing, it's all ancient tomes preserved through time." He smiled happily, thinking, after all, they're still mages, right? A team member suddenly patted his shoulder with a grin, eyes curved, "You're amazing, Captain." Noticing something, he glanced in a direction, The earlier member turned his back to Elric and waved to someone. Just then Sean came over, slung an arm around Elric's shoulder, and grinned familiarly, "You bastard, what did you just do, Sean?" Elric smiled confidently, "Who scored full marks on the theory exams?" "I imagined it like a test, then solved it with spatial geometry and prime theory. Suddenly his eyes widened as an alarm bell rang in his head. Wait a test. Elric suddenly froze, his face went pale, something felt off, like being given a practice question before an exam. Seeing him dazed, Sean asked, "Hey, what are you thinking so deeply about?" Elric turned to look at him. "Huh? Nothing." Sean suddenly patted his shoulder. "On a day this great you should smile." He laughed and shouted, "Elric Melvinger, from now on no one can ignore you or your prestigious magical family anymore." Elric stared straight into Sean's eyes, his own wide with astonishment. Sean ruffled his hair. Elric smiled with curved eyes. "Well, even if that still weighs on me, I'll just enjoy this moment." "I'm free now," he said. At that moment a team member standing on the pile of gold spoke into a magic orb. Whatever the reply was, he suddenly curled his lips into a sly smile. After a while someone suddenly grabbed Elric's hand. That captain abruptly dragged Elric to another place. "There's a laboratory here too, hurry up." Elric stiffened. Fine." Over on the other side Sean called to the two of them, "Our Elric's grown up, he's even called captain now, I should follow them." Just then Rivern came running, panting, "Sean, there's a dragon carcass behind the treasure mound." Sean turned around in surprise and shouted, "What, a dragon?" Rivern suddenly grabbed his hand tightly. He said, "He'll get there later." Sean stared at him. Rivern, sweating nervously, urged, "Let's go." They approached a gigantic skeleton. "Wow, at that size this must be a dragon king." Rivern glanced at it. "Yeah, it looks like it's been here over 4,000 years. Meanwhile Elric was suddenly shoved forward. He was surrounded by the group. They forced him down, hands on the ground, snarling, "You dogs." Elric glanced at them, grinding his teeth. "You bastards," he thought. He'd let his guard down out of excitement. One of them squinted, "We mean no harm, we like you." But he looked at Elric coldly and added, "Work comes first." At that moment Sean suddenly called out from the other side, Wait, Rivern." Rivern asked back, "HM. What's up?" Sean stared at the white skeleton before him. "Didn't that thing just move?" Sean, curious, asked, "Where are the others?" Hearing him, Elric glanced over. Rivern made up an excuse, "They're probably taking time to explore." What a sight, I've never seen this before." Sean hurried over excitedly, "Where?" "Let me see." Elric looked toward the two far off and tried to shout, "Help." A man in front suddenly grabbed his collar and squeezed, forcing him to vomit a mouthful of blood. Elric's face went ashen. Damn it. His eyes turned milky, his consciousness blurred. He thought, "I shouldn't have trusted any of them." Having pushed him there, the man suddenly unleashed fire magic. A blazing red flame burst into being in his palm. At that moment Elric shouted, "Everyone, get back." The man in front looked puzzled. "What?" Before he could finish the word, a monstrous wave of mana swept across him. Elric's eyes widened in shock as blood splattered his face. The man's form vanished in an instant, leaving only a hand on the ground. Elric couldn't hold back his horror. "What the hell is that?" Elric turned his head. He looked toward the place that had just unleashed that terrifying wave of mana. A resonant blast rang in his ears. He stared in shock. Sean and Rivern, who had been standing quite a distance away, were now scrambling desperately toward Elric, shouting, "Dragon, save me." Elric saw the white skeleton suddenly move again. A huge accumulation of mana gathered in its mouth, and its violent motion made the cavern rumble and collapse. He froze, cold sweat breaking out. Damn it! Rocks and earth thundered down from the cavern above. Elric looked up at the scene before him. Shit, the dragon skeleton was now concentrating mana in its mouth and lunging toward him. His whole body trembled. He thought inwardly, find a cave, find a cave. Elric, this is also a test. Seeing Rivern and everyone else panicking to flee, Elric grew more urgent, just find the cave. His eyes widened as he silently warned himself, don't let the dragon notice you. Elric's gaze hardened, but the dragon skeleton in front of him suddenly froze. Elric couldn't help but wonder why it was just standing there. Elric stood still as old memories flashed through his mind. A dragon's breath is still just magic. Dragons are truly astonishing. Time incantation delayed. The source. Sean is safe. Idiot Rivern shouldn't be told. Even so the mana cost is still too great. Elric stared ahead. Right, if I want to do this in one beat I need a little time to prepare. Thinking that, Elric immediately shouted, Expedition team, form a defensive ring and bring it down together. The men who had been about to kill him instantly obeyed and took up shields. Sean and Rivern concentrated mana to form a barrier. Sean said sternly, "Everyone, hold your positions." A layer of mana shields suddenly enveloped the pile of shields, protecting those inside. Elric opened his eyes wide and shouted, "It's coming." At the same time the dragon skeleton gaped its mouth and unleashed an extraordinarily terrifying spell. The spell targeted the 2 layers of shields the group had and charged at them. With a boom the magic struck the shield and detonated. Numerous cracks began to appear across the surface of the mana shield. Elric glared, calculating that this attack would last 20 seconds. If we can hold it off we'll have a chance. Sean poured mana into the shield, trying to withstand it. "Everyone, hang on." The impacts kept ringing out. The shield's surface was pocked by repeated strikes. Elric glanced toward the door. Running to it would take about 17 seconds. Looking at the round button on the door, Elric calculated, "If I can close the door in 3 seconds, everyone will survive." A flash of insight suddenly lit up in Elric's mind. The dragon skeleton's magic swept across one of the team members. The next moment he simply vanished into thin air. Elric was shocked. The mana shield had developed countless holes. Sean's group still struggled to maintain it as a defense. Sweat poured down Elric's face like a stream. He shouted, "Right now." Seeing the dragon skeleton concentrating mana to prepare another attack, Elric yelled, "Run." The whole group crouched and sprinted away, accelerating. "If it catches you you'll be torn to pieces." Elric ran while thinking to himself, "Good, if this keeps up." Suddenly Elric sensed something. A huge question mark appeared in his mind. Cracks began to appear in the air, and the next moment the 2 people running beside him turned into pools of blood. Blood splattered onto Elric's face. He turned his head to look back. A team member's body was flying up, fresh blood spraying everywhere. Elric widened his eyes. Impossible. A swarm of skeletal figures suddenly appeared from the sky. They set upon and slaughtered the expedition members. Elric recognized them, the legendary entities that guard the dragon. Elric turned his head, stunned. The name, Spartoi, came to mind. He was momentarily unable to react and froze in place. Suddenly a fireball shot toward him from behind. The fireball streaked past Elric and struck precisely the Spartoi standing before him. The one who cast it was Sean. He yelled, "Elric, take it down with me." No sooner had he finished than a swarm of Spartoi from above dove down to attack him. Elric wiped the blood off his cheek. "I need to figure something out," he thought, while everyone around continued to scream. "Help me," they cried. Elric faced the 2 Spartoi before him. Ahead of him the white skeleton waited to strike. He thought inwardly, "I'm the only one who can do this." He frowned, because every problem has a solution. At that moment the pendant on Elric's neck flashed a silver light. Elric closed his eyes, clutching his head in pain, gritting his teeth. The next instant, when he opened his eyes, a blinding light suddenly flared. Elric suddenly saw threads weaving through the air. Astonished, he wondered why everything looked like this. Everywhere he could see straight lines intersecting like a spiderweb. Sean was attacking a Spartoi at that moment. He turned his head and mouthed something. Elric thought he seemed to be trying to say something, but he couldn't hear it. At the same time Elric shouted, "Dodge." Elric narrowed one eye and muttered, still not understanding what he was saying, "What?" A Spartoi from above lunged to attack Elric. Just as he turned his head, he suddenly shifted to one side and easily avoided its deadly strike. The Spartoi's attack missed. It was shocked and momentarily stunned. Elric stared in surprise. Did I just dodge that? Before Elric could think further, the Spartoi launched another new attack. Elric could still easily avoid that strike. He broke into a cold sweat, staring at it, thinking, "This isn't imagination, I can see them, where it will go and how I need to dodge." The Spartoi continued to press forward. Elric could foresee its attacks and realized he could see where it would strike. Elric stepped back to keep his distance from them. If so, he'd be safe as long as he followed those points of light. Elric worried. What if this is a trap? Over there Sean was still desperately fighting off the Spartoi. The expedition team was being torn apart. They shouted, "Is anyone?" Before they could finish the shout, a roar of fury echoed in his ears. Elric kept dodging the Spartoi's attacks and thought inwardly, "No, I don't have time to think anymore. If things continue like this then." Elric suddenly vanished from his spot. He passed through the Spartoi blocking his way and charged toward the door. He knew deep down everyone would die pointlessly. Understanding that, he shouted, "Everyone, follow me." Sean led the cry, "Hurry up, everyone." The others helped each other and tried to run after Elric. Rivern, lost in the crowd, trembled with fear and begged, "Let me come too," and the man beside him shouted, "Rivern, wait." Elric was screaming inwardly, "Go to where my eyes can see." Everyone ran in unison behind Elric. He nimbly dodged the Spartoi's attacks and shouted, "This way! I'll go first, duck and jump like I do." Elric signaled loudly to Sean. Sean dropped a fireball at its left leg. Sean quickly followed suit, and the Spartoi was blown apart. Finally everyone reached the exit outside the door. The group felt they had seen the light of salvation. "We're almost at the exit, just a little further." They sprinted madly toward the outside. "We're free." Elric watched them go, thinking, "Good, everyone's alive, we just need to close that door." Just then someone suddenly cried out, "Someone help me." The hand about to press the protrusion on the door froze. Rivern, behind Elric, trembled and lay on the ground pleading, "Please." Elric turned to the Spartoi closing in behind them, thinking, "Damn it, if we want to shut the door we have to leave him. What should I do? This guy's such a pain." Elric gritted his teeth, but the Spartoi still raised its arm to strike Rivern. He tried with all his might to get up but couldn't. Elric clenched his teeth, thinking, "I can't let him die." He raced back against the Spartoi. The creature slammed its arm down with a piercing scream, "Elric." The next moment, just as Rivern opened his eyes, nothing happened to him. The Spartoi seemed blocked by something and couldn't reach them. Elric sat on the ground panting. It looked like they couldn't get out. Rivern clapped his hands to his face and cried excitedly, "I'm alive." Sean barked, "Elric, are you crazy?" Elric grinned, eyes curved, "It's that guy's fault, his legs are weak, so why blame me?" Sean was so angry he was shaking as he looked at the blocked Spartoi in front of him. Elric couldn't help but think as the Spartoi turned and walked away, he wondered, "They can't get out." Elric looked up and around, only now did he think about this. Above the cavern, a layer of red mana was interwoven. Elric thought to himself that there were signs of destruction above the cave. The intruders were right beside us, huh? Suddenly he noticed the dragon skeleton inside. It was gathering mana in its mouth, but above all Elric noticed something else. Something was embedded in the dragon skeleton. Then a loud explosion came from above the cavern, massive rocks thundered down. Rivern screamed in fright, "What? The Spartoi are coming here." A Spartoi leaped down from above, heavy debris crashing down with it. Rivern cried, "Run, where do we run? We're surrounded." Elric urged, "Keep running." He thought to himself that Sean seemed to sense something. Sean turned his head to look back. Everyone scrambled out in confusion. Elric remained behind the door, not yet leaving. Sean shouted anxiously, "Elric, what are you playing at?" Elric turned back and smiled at him, "Go ahead of me." Sean hurriedly lunged to the door wanting to pull Elric out, but just as he got close to the door, it shut in front of him. It slammed closed to Sean's helplessness. He shouted, "Elric." Sean frantically pounded the door, roaring, "You damn bastard, why won't this thing open anymore?" Elric gritted his teeth, his whole body trembling. 7 years earlier, after Elric was suspended, Sean sat across from him and asked, "You're Elric, right? Nice to meet you, I'm Nemister, want to be friends?" Elric looked at Sean coldly. He opened his mouth and uttered a single word that stunned Sean. After that period, Elric buried himself diligently in piles of books. Sean, thick-skinned, stuck his hand out in front of him again. He smiled with curved eyes and said earnestly, "Be friends." This time Elric didn't even bother to look up and said, "Buzz off." Sean persistently followed him from behind, "Do you want to?" Elric cut him off coldly, "Get lost." Time passed, night fell. Whenever Sean spoke, Elric would cut in, "Get lost." Sean was a little resentful. Elric continued to chase him off, "Go away," and those words crushed Sean. I didn't even get to say anything. A voice rang out across the academy, "You must be truly resilient to become a true mage." The speaker stood before Elric and Sean, "You'll receive points based on the order of completion, so work hard. However, if you use magic, you'll be disqualified." After finishing, the person shouted, "Begin." The group of trainees immediately turned and dashed into the forest. They were all giving it their all. Their figures soon disappeared along the path. Sean smiled confidently and sped ahead. He ran without pause. A while later Sean panted, "Phew, maybe about halfway. Should I bring Elric along?" No sooner had he spoken than a shadow suddenly flashed in the night. The next instant that figure suddenly kicked toward him. Sean was kicked and hurled away. He rolled several times on the ground, kicking up dust. Sean managed with difficulty to grab a protruding rock on the cliff face. His whole body dangled in midair. "Sean, bloodied, gritted his teeth and cried out, "Anyone? Help!" A crowd of people suddenly arrived at the cliffside. Rivern led them, curling his lip in ridicule, using magic to climb. "Quit whining." Sean shut one eye, unable to speak. Both hands clinging to the cliff, Sean's grip trembled constantly. "How long has it been? I can't hold on much longer." Sean couldn't hold back the tears. "I could die like this. Even if I'm disqualified, should I use magic?" Tears squeezed from his eyes and ran down his cheeks. His hand slipped a little. "If I'm disqualified, how will I ever see my father again?" In the end Sean couldn't hold on and his hand slipped. Damn it. At that moment, someone suddenly reached out and grabbed his exhausted, powerless hands. Elric strained and tried to pull Sean up. Sean looked at him in astonishment. Elric, he gritted his teeth and clamped down, "Hold on tight." After a while, the two of them leaned against two trees by the cliff and panted. Sean looked at his bruised, swollen ankle and said, "Go ahead, I'm making you late." Elric stared at his ankle. Seeing the large swollen bruise, it was clear Sean had sprained his ankle and could hardly continue. Elric kindly helped Sean up. Sean was startled and confused. "Hey, what are you doing? I told you to go ahead." Elric looked ahead indifferently and said, "You once said you wanted to be friends with me, remember?" Sean froze, then the next moment he was so moved his face flushed. "Elric, you." Elric suddenly cut him off. "Forget it. Lend me some of your artifacts at home, okay?" Sean was so mad he had nothing more to say. Elric bared his teeth in a grin. "Sounds good, right? We're friends after all." Sean resolutely looped his arm around him. His shout echoed through the forest, "This bastard is trying to scam your friend." Elric said nonchalantly, "I saved you, didn't I? You should at least repay me. By the way, messy hair suits you, why not let your bangs down?" Sean snapped angrily, "Shut up, that's a matter of honor." Sean thought of the Spartoi inside, "That bastard, even though you're weaker than me, you still like to show off." He gritted his teeth, his whole body trembling, and shouted loudly, "Help me." Sean stared at the door before him and said firmly, "Elric, wait a moment. I'll call the elders or at least your father. Please, don't die." As he spoke, Sean dashed out of the cavern. Elric leaned his back against the door. "Thanks, Sean. That's why I can't let you get tangled in danger." Then Elric suddenly lunged forward. His figure vanished on the spot as he charged alone into the crowded Spartoi and shouted, "Do you think you know who I am?" Elric weaved through and struck the Spartoi surrounding him. He panted, sweat pouring out, "Found it." Elric reached out and snapped the calves of the Spartoi in front of him. Using their blind spots as cover, he rushed forward like a gust of wind. Elric ran so fast that dust swirled up in a thick cloud. He reached out his hand. It was the item. The moment he touched it, a vast surge of mana suddenly burst forth. Elric held Gihen's breath in his hand and silently invoked, "Arm." Mana immediately gathered around him, forming the celestial Azure King armor. He activated Gihen's breath. Fire heals fire. Elric's eyes flashed with red light. "You lot want a taste of my goods, do you?" A blazing red magical flame suddenly erupted around Elric. Normally this artifact would require mana to use. Blood trickled from the corner of Elric's eye as he unlocked it. The red flames flared ever more fiercely, as if trying to devour everything nearby. "I will use my own life to substitute for mana." In an instant, the flames licked over the Spartoi before him, drenching them in a sea of fire. The intense burning reduced them to nothing but dry bones. With a loud explosion, Elric muttered, "If I'm right, this was all the dragon's test." Elric ran to the dragon skeleton. He landed lightly, and there lay the answer. The dragon skeleton before him still stood towering and motionless. Elric aimed at the object embedded in the dragon skeleton. He stepped onto its colossal bones to steady himself. A pale golden layer of mana swirled around Elric as he looked at the item before him. This spear was both the key and the answer to the test. Seeing the Spartoi crawling up toward him, Elric couldn't help but think, what if his answer was wrong? More and more Spartoi climbed onto the dry skeleton. Lost in his thoughts, Elric worried that if this was someone's prank, he'd fail here. Watching the Spartoi grow ever denser, Elric quietly resolved that he would never give up. He smiled and placed his hand on the spear's shaft, because he was a Melvinger. At the same time, the Spartoi lunged and grabbed him. The next moment, a blue light suddenly flashed, bathing the entire cavern. When Elric looked up, he froze. "What?" His pupils dilated and surprise spread across his face. what had happened. A giant dragon was circling in the sky above, and there was a figure standing directly in front of him. The dragon seemed to have detected Elric's presence. The figure exhaled a breath thick with mana. Though the silhouette had a human form, the huge horns on its head showed it was not human. Elric stared. Who is that? The figure suddenly turned and smiled grotesquely, its eyes glowing blood red. Elric suddenly felt a fear that reached deep into his soul. The dragon in the sky reared its head and roared. The figure abruptly raised a hand and began to gather mana into his palm. He unleashed a terrifying surge of mana from his whole body. The dragon opened its mouth wide, mana immediately condensed in its maw, and it hurled that terrifying energy down toward where the figure stood. At the same time, the figure suddenly raised his spear, pointing it straight at the dragon above. The spear was wreathed in tremendous mana. The man's pupils flared crimson. He stared at the dragon and smiled, madness in his expression. The spear and the dragon's overwhelming magic collided and exploded in midair. Elric was shaken by the aftershock and hastily raised his hands to shield himself, eyes wide with amazement. This amount of mana, an 8th rank mage, no, not just. The figure leapt high to dodge the dragon's attack. His spear drove straight into the dragon's skull, creating a large hole. Elric was stunned, unable to believe his eyes. He quickly reassessed. This was far beyond that. The dragon's eyes gradually lost their light. The ground began to tremble violently. Chunks of earth and rock collapsed and tumbled downward with thunderous crashes. The figure continued relentlessly attacking the dragon, concentrating mana into the spear before delivering the finishing blow. A blinding golden light illuminated the area. Elric gaped as the scene shifted. He seemed to glimpse the silhouette of a colossal monster behind the figure. It gripped the terrifying mana column that connected to the spear embedded through the dragon's head. The figure stood atop the dragon as the mana pillar pierced the ground, sending earth and stone flying. Elric stammered, "What the? This time everything has changed." The figure now noticed Elric. "When a vessel of quality has appeared before me." The next moment, a stream of black air suddenly surged into Elric, and he rolled his eyes. The pain forced tears from his eyes. Elric felt suffocated, coughing dryly as cold sweat poured down his body. Thinking back over what had just happened, Elric instantly understood. This was not the dragon's test but the Demon King's trap. Elric's body was cloaked in dense black mana. He collapsed to his knees. The agony of being invaded by mana nearly made him fall. Is this how I die? Darkness shrouded his eyes and he had no strength left. He felt as if his ribs were being worn away by friction. The bones in his arms seemed to crumble under that power. The Demon King, trying to possess Elric, laughed loudly. "Ha ha ha, Sean's vicious mana is making the vessel stronger." Elric opened his mouth wide. Thick black mana poured from his eye sockets and mouth. He cursed silently. Damn it. Elric seemed to see motes of mana gradually enveloping him. His ancestors and all clan members had sacrificed their lives to drive back demons in the demon war. He recalled his parents' funeral, how they too faced death. His memories returned to the time when the two children hugged each other for comfort, with only his sister and himself left. Elric thought of those who had always been stalking him like prey, the royalty, the magic tower, and the vassal families, all of whom had revealed their rotten nature. Even the one who had always stood by the two siblings, the person he trusted and relied on most, was the same. He began to show his fox's tail, trying to seize what belonged to the siblings. His body was gradually being destroyed by the Demon King's terrifying magic. As we tried to protect them, he remembered that day. His sister had tried to touch the badge on that man's coat, the man they called Uncle, and pleaded, "Please, Uncle." That uncle coldly turned his back and left the two siblings. We were abandoned. Elric coughed up a mouthful of blood and screamed. The pain felt like his flesh being cut. Facing those who had betrayed and humiliated the clan, a small stone suddenly flew and struck his back. Elric cried and angrily threw stones repeatedly. His sister tried to stop him then, but what could I do? Elric asked himself helplessly. The two siblings were left in an abandoned mansion as if they never existed. Back in the present, he cursed inwardly, "Damn it. No matter what, I will clear the mana blockage and restore the family." The thick black mana seemed intent on consuming him, but he did not give up. Hatred rose in his heart, vowing to make the traitors regret it. Elric sank into darkness, hearing his heart pound wildly. "No, I'm not even started yet. I can't end like this." The Melvinger pendant around his neck suddenly emitted a blinding golden light. "I won't let you devour me like this, you bastard." The next moment, Elric was enveloped in a pale golden layer of mana. Scattered runic inscriptions circled him. His eyes, once drained of color, suddenly gleamed blue. He heard a whisper, "I hope this voice will reach our descendants in the future." That blue mana gradually pushed the demon king out of Elric's body. He ground his teeth in anger and said, "What kind of power is this?" Elric suddenly reached out toward him. The demon king's body, shrouded in blue mana, began to fade. He flinched in astonishment. The voice still rang in Elric's ear. His body suddenly changed, his expression oddly calm, his hand reaching forward as if grasping something. The sound continued, "By agreement, the first demon king will be devoured." Having finished speaking, Elric abruptly raised his hand, mana gathered along his arm, and something began to appear there. The demon king ground his teeth and roared, "Impossible." He was gradually being absorbed by that source of magic but still tried to utter his remaining words, "Not like this." The darkness that had shrouded Elric began to dissipate. He kept his hand raised. On his arm a strange blue draconic form slowly took shape. Elric stared at his two translucent hands in bewilderment. "Where am I?" A hazy figure appeared before him, the horizon on the sky shone clearly. Looking at that person's back, Elric couldn't help but wonder, "Who are you? Why do you look so familiar?" The man answered, "We are the first scholars who pursued the pinnacle of magic." After speaking, he turned around. Elric's mind was a little hazy. Was this the same voice he'd heard before? The sun above radiated a dazzling light, but gradually that light was overtaken by red hues and shadow. The figure continued, "However, those who vied for greater power have brought misfortune to the world because they were corrupted by demons." The darkness seemed intent on swallowing the sun. He recounted calmly, "We decided to fix this and atone for our past." The man suddenly smiled, "We created an order in this world." Seeing the monster with the huge horned head, Elric wondered inwardly, "What is that? A demon king?" He quickly denied it. "No." The creature's giant hand seemed to grasp the sun above. "It is the demon lord," the man said casually. "An order can purge demons to the root." He reached out, and across his arm a galaxy-like band appeared. The next instant a powerful shock rang out as countless colossal dragons beat their wings across the sky. The man continued calmly, "Eradicating the demons is our mission." He tilted his palm skyward, when suddenly a fearsome demon burst forth, shattering rock as it surged forward. Demons will never completely disappear, they will always return. Behind it came an army of demons with glowing red eyes. The man added, "You must keep slaying them, time and again, until then, the order cannot be disbanded." When he finished, the man raised his hand and made a strange gesture. The lead demon was unexpectedly knocked backward. A white cloud of dust billowed up, thick and blinding. The ground shook with successive thunderous rumbles. The other person stood calmly in place without flinching. The next moment, the crowd of demons surged forward together. He looked up at the sky and smiled, "Someday in the future." The lower body of the demon lord began to crack all over. It roared as the earth and rocks it disturbed collapsed with a thunderous crash. The next moment, its body suddenly started to fade. Its eyes flashed a red light. The fire magic exploded wildly, and the demon lord suddenly thrust its giant arm toward the other man as if to grab him. Watching its hand draw ever nearer, the other man still stood motionless. Elric almost reflexively shouted in alarm, "Careful." He raised his hand. Before his eyes a ceiling shone brilliantly, and he was stunned. Sunlight from outside filtered through the window frame. Elric sat bolt upright, a question mark appearing in his mind. He turned to call the person sitting beside his bed. Sean didn't bother to look at him. Elric asked curiously, "Are you crying?" Sean immediately retorted, "Me? Cry?" He froze, his whole body shaking uncontrollably. Inside he was silently screaming, "Damn it, why does he wake up now? This is so embarrassing." Elric, a bit speechless, looked at Sean's back and waved his hand, "You're really crying." He kept nagging in Sean's ear, "It's okay, you can cry. Remember when we were in the cave you cried then too." Hearing that, Sean was so embarrassed he turned angry. He spun to glare at Elric. Elric broke into a cold sweat and hurriedly admitted his mistake, "Oh, sorry." Elric's voice rang through the hospital, "By the way, did you send the rescue team to save me?" Sean, sitting by his bed, answered, "Yeah, you sicko." Elric rolled his eyes at the bruise on his face and muttered, "But could you use magic to heal this bruise right away instead of just giving me an egg?" Sean said matter-of-factly, "You should be grateful I at least gave you something, you bastard." Elric was at a loss for words. "You're the head of a clan, yet you keep calling me names like that." Sean glared at him, "What, you sicko? Elric, quick to save face, turned his head away pretending not to understand. What? I didn't say anything. Sean scowled at Elric and added, and while we're at it, if you act stupid like that again. At that moment Sean suddenly made a request, don't get up yet. Elric was stunned, do what? Sean lost patience, shut up and get up. Elric stammered, okay. Sean put his hand up to measure Elric's height, you're taller now, huh? He advised, try looking in the mirror. Elric touched the glass and saw that he truly was much taller than before. He widened his eyes in surprise and recalled being in the dragon's cave. What had happened? Had his body been altered? Sean looked at him curiously and asked, what happened? Tell me. And what about the dragon? Elric turned to Sean and thought apologetically, sorry Sean, I can't tell you yet. So he pretended ignorance, winked at Sean and smiled, I'll tell you first when the time is right. Sean patted his shoulder, all right, Elric, I trust you already have some idea. He teased in mock offense, but seriously, you bastard, keeping secrets from me too. Elric forced a conciliatory smile, don't be mad. After that Elric continued, what about that cave? Sean's hand, which had been peeling an egg, froze. My clan will take over that place. Elric sat back down on the bed, it'll probably be busy excavating it. Elric opened his mouth wide and shoved the egg in. No, they only sealed it off and won't allow anyone to enter. Hearing that, Elric couldn't help shouting, what? Why? Sean swallowed the egg. Because it belongs to you, you found it. They can't let anyone treat it however they please. By law, the dragon's lair belongs to the finder. But usually the great academies can secure rights by applying to excavate, that's how they collude. Sean laughed heartily, the magic towers and academies will go crazy trying to get their hands on that place. Seeing Elric smile at him, Sean couldn't help asking, what are you looking at? Elric suddenly became polite, thanks. Sean looked away, embarrassed and at a loss for words. Elric curled the corner of his mouth into a smile, thinking inwardly that the Nemesis clan would surely want excavation rights too, yet they'd do this for him. Sean suddenly cut across his thoughts, gross, you clown, please don't talk like that. Sean punched Elric on the arm. What are you laughing at, you damn bastard? Elric replied nonchalantly, thanks for the compliment, you sicko. At that moment Elric suddenly remembered something, wait a minute. He thought of barracks and quietly decided this wasn't the time, that hunched old man would surely be doing everything he could to secure excavation rights. Elric's smile turned cold, he dared try to finish him off. Sean, seeing that smile, couldn't help but point and yell, what crazy scheme is he plotting now? Every time you smile like that, something's about to happen. Elric grinned, his eyes curved. Sean, he asked uneasily, what are you planning to do? Elric said friendly, I want to ask a favor. Sean, sensing trouble, shut his eyes tight, I'm not listening, I'm not hearing anything. Elric acted as if he hadn't heard and said, just announce that I was seriously injured. Sean collapsed into himself and shrank into a corner, damn it, I overheard that. Elsewhere, someone was slowly striding forward. That person wore the attire representing the Nemesis clan. At the Royal Magical Hospital, people wearing the same uniform stood in a line guarding the gate. Barracks frowned, could you repeat that? The man standing behind the glass door replied, Student Elric Melvinger is currently unconscious due to rather severe injuries from the trip to the dragon's lair, so I ask that you please leave. Barracks broke into a cold sweat, I came all this way and you're telling me to go back. The man beside him spoke up, what about excavation rights, are you just going to leave that cave alone? The crowd at the hospital gate shouted, why is the Nemesis clan blocking the hospital entrance? Elric, looking down from the upper floor, muttered, idiots. Just then, someone pushed the door open. He was Konis, the Nemesis clan spokesperson, who said, please rest. Elric fell silent and didn't respond. Light from outside streamed through the window frame. The door to Elric's room finally closed. Elric exhaled with relief. Hey, he glanced to the side, why don't you stop staring and say something? How long are you going to scrutinize me, Mephisto? The demon lord suddenly appeared in midair. He crossed his arms angrily and said, why don't you show some respect to the venerable king standing right before you? The great demon lord who once plunged the world into danger and chaos, who stood on the mountain of white bones terrifying all, is named Mephisto, however, now. Elric picked his nose indifferently and said, maybe I should call you Felis, Huh. Mephisto heard that and immediately went pale with anger, shouting, You. The next moment he attacked Elric frantically in vain. Die, Elric thought indifferently, he's nothing but a cotton ball evil spirit now, that might even be better than him. Night at the Royal Hospital. Outside Elric's room, people stood silently listening to the beating of a heart. Elric placed his hand over his chest. In any case, he could feel a stream of mana existing there. Just as I thought, it's not my imagination. A dragon heart, the energy source containing the absolute power of an ancient dragon. Elric recalled the image he had witnessed in the dragon's lair. The dragon had clearly died after being pierced by the demon lord's spear. Could the dragon heart inside my body now be the heart pounding inside my chest? No, there's still something different. Elric rubbed his chin. He only had memories of the demon lord trying to take over this body. He glanced toward Mephisto. Stop staring at me and say something. How long are you going to look at me like that, Mephisto? Mephisto ground his teeth angrily and said, I told you not to call me that. He is a mighty demon lord who plunged the world into fear and suffering. Mephistopheles. In ancient times, when gods ruled the world, that dark demon had 4 lieutenants. The first representative was Phinus, the destroyer, depicted like an eastern dragon. Next came Insaner the mad, symbolized similarly to a bird. The third representative was Fornications the lewd, a monster with 3 heads. And est originale peccatum, the primal source of sin, demon lord Mephistopheles, the supreme and most powerful of the myths. This name, Mephisto, is bound to me. Mephisto, unwilling, pointed at Elric's head and shouted, I told you, the name was given by the great demon god. Elric yawned widely. Mephisto ground his teeth in fury, his whole body trembling. You. Elric raged and barked as if attacking, I swear I'll tear you to pieces. Elric sat silently on the bed. Oh my, you're annoyingly loud, go to hell. He muttered, does a demon lord usually behave this stupidly? I've told you many times and you still don't get it, are you hard of hearing from old age? Mephisto heard him and trembled with rage, clenching his fists. 1,000 years, I waited for 1,000 years, I waited 1,000 years, yet my mana was taken by someone like this? Mephisto thought about his identity. I am Demon Lord Mephisto, I once made the whole world bow at my feet. He thought of the past standing atop heaps of white bones and thought to himself, that is my reason for existing. In a sky red as blood, a dragon spread its wings and flew high, yet the silhouette of that dragon grew ever larger. The dragon opened its jaws and roared, then charged forward. It was the Dragon King Shaynark. At that time Mephisto faced it without a hint of fear. Shaynark launched a sphere of energy at Mephisto. Mephisto used his spear to block the attack, annoyed, thinking it had gotten in his way. Shaynark produced countless strands of magical chains. Those chains wrapped around and bound Mephisto. Shaynark declared, Demon Lord Mephisto, you will be buried here together with me. The chains that bound Mephisto also bound Shaynark. Mephisto roared in fury, damn it. And so it went. For 1,000 years, Mephisto was imprisoned in the dragon's lair. I waited and waited. His eye flashed a cold light, he laughed maniacally. When he saw Elric's party enter the lair, Mephisto rejoiced, finally you have come. He targeted Elric among them, the vessel will release me from this seal. After that, Elric fought with all his might, the perfect vessel was superbly completed. All the tests lay before me. Elric passed the trials and stepped to where the spear was lodged in the dragon's skeleton. Then Mephisto, as planned, tried to seize Elric's body. He nearly succeeded in taking control of his body and soul. At the crucial moment something altered Elric. Mephisto was completely suppressed by it, and all his plans fell apart. Back in the present, Mephisto looked out the window. Now I am reduced to a fragment of demonic energy, even my manifestation has vanished. His face filled with resentment and hatred. What power could possibly absorb me? Elric lay on the bed, playing with the pendant and grinning, cut the noble power act. Mephisto froze at that, then the next instant he screamed in rage, how dare a wretch like you? If I were the me from 1,000 years ago I would, you bastards, this can only be the work of the Melvingers, who do they think they are? I once fought the whole world alone. Elric paid him no mind and focused on the pendant. He squinted, I hope our message reaches them. He recalled the scene in the dragon's lair and the words he heard, with my descendants in the future, one day. Elric looked at the darkened pendant and thought of the statue and the person who had saved him in the lair. Was that voice his? Elric remembered the memory from that day. Here we follow the covenant. The first demon will be swallowed. Suddenly Elric realized something. He widened his eyes in shock. Wait, could swallowed mean I absorbed the demon lord's power? Immediately Elric sat bolt upright. So this magical face is a tool for devouring demon lords. Elric quickly dismissed that. No, it's a tool to devour demons. Clarity reached him. Elric turned to look at Mephisto. Mephisto scowled irritably. What is it? What are you staring at? Elric, lost in thought, didn't answer. Could it devour other demons like Mephisto? He thought of different demons. The first demon. That means there will be a second and a third. Elric bared his teeth in a cold smile. Prepare yourselves, demon lords, you'll soon be impoverished. Mephisto involuntarily shuddered. What is this chill? The next day, Elric appeared by a cliff with a rushing river below. Mephisto looked at the scene and couldn't help asking in puzzlement, why are you wandering out here? Seeing Elric ignore him, he muttered again, when an adult asks you must answer properly. Elric lost patience. You're fine, shut up, you worthless ghost. Elric's coat was lifted by the wind. He put his hands before him and concentrated. Before learning how to use the pendant's power, I must confirm a few things. Elric sat cross-legged on the mat and closed his eyes. He tried to relax, his eyebrows eased. In the next moment, Elric suddenly sensed everything around him. Blue flowers bloomed brilliantly. A ladybug fluttered its wings and flew to the flower. It folded its wings and perched on that flower. A gentle breeze blew through, the air moving through the space like a thin silk scarf. All of this was happening right beside Elric. Although his eyes were closed he could feel it. In his mind there was the thought of a ladybug beating its wings, the sensation of a breeze passing by. I can see and sense everything. Elric slowly opened his eyes. If my suspicion is correct, he reached out his hand to try to condense mana in his palm. Elric curled the fingers of that hand inward, and finally clenched his hand into a fist. The heart in his chest was pounding wildly as he silently intoned, incinerate. The next moment, Elric seemed to see light within the darkness. A flame suddenly flared up right before him. Mephisto widened his eyes in astonishment. This is dragon magic. He could hardly believe his eyes, an ordinary person using dragonic spells. Watching Elric flick his fingers, Mephisto couldn't help thinking that even with Melvinger blood this was a bit much. Sparks burst into the air as Elric parted his lips and looked up at the sky. Seeing the flame burning before him, he suddenly laughed. Now I can use magic. Elric pressed his lips together. Finally the damned magical blockage that plagued me. He recalled the insults he'd endured since childhood. The shame of the Melvinger family. How far would such a prestigious magical house be trampled? That he would be the grandson of our first headmaster. Unacceptable. Was he a child the headmaster found and took in? How could a mage fail to draw a basic circle? Those scumbags only open their mouths and don't know their place. Elric stood and looked up at the golden late afternoon sky, at all who had betrayed the Melvinger house and abandoned me. His eyes grew cold. I will make them regret it. Cameras flashed repeatedly as they operated. Voices rose without cease. Is it true that student Elric Melvinger is in a coma? And what about the Dragon Lair excavation volume? A low voice answered curtly, cutting off the crowd's noisy questions. The official announcement will be made at the Tower of Magic, so please refer to the statement. After things were handled quietly, he returned inside the house. His whole body trembling, he spoke, Master, please don't make me do things like this. Sean, weary, rubbed his head and murmured, he's here, well done. Carl politely reported, it's nothing, those disturbances whenever you're with Elric almost killed me. He stepped closer as he continued, but if your fraud is exposed, the Tower of Magic and the Crown won't support you. Can you bear the consequences? That question made Sean freeze. Well, Carl continued while handing Sean a handkerchief. Elric said he'd accounted for everything, so I'll trust him. You're all sweaty, wipe it off. They all knew one truth clearly, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. Sean held his head in pain, his body trembling with anger as he thought, Elric, you bastard, do you know what I've endured? Carl, wiping his face, asked, where did young Elric go? Sean brusquely replied, I don't know, he wandered off somewhere. A note was left with a scrawled drawing and a faint line of writing that made Carl wonder, with that frail body, where could he possibly have gone? He examined it. Then, as if he saw something, he softly spoke, young master. Sean quickly glanced at Carl as he stepped closer with only 3 words, something's happened. Sean asked tersely in a low voice, what is it? Carl's white envelope was scrutinized meticulously. He stammered as he explained it. But before he could say another word the door was thrown wide open, announcing the grand entrance of a girl. What plot are you hatching behind my back, little brother? Sean goggled and shouted, Sister, what are you doing here? She asked back with a faint smile, why are you surprised? This is the Firebird Witch, Tasha Narester. She smiled indifferently as she remarked, is it strange for a sister to visit her brother? Speaking of the Royal Tower of Magic and the Ecclesiastical Alliance, each produced the century's great geniuses in the same generation. They are the 3 stars who will lead the Empire and are called the new 3 stars. Tasha stepped forward and pinched Carl's ear as she questioned, didn't you show it my letter? He fumbled to explain, I've been scatterbrained lately. Sean's sister, the youngest in history to earn the title of Archmage, is one of those 3. He watched the girl warily, then asked, so why are you here? She smirked and explained, I heard your friend is ill, and since I also hold a magical certificate, I couldn't stand idly by. Isn't Elric in his room? Is the boy elsewhere? Her question immediately recalled that crude drawing, and Sean inwardly cursed, oh no, if she goes into the sick room we're doomed. Tearing up, he tried to find a way to bluff his escape, she's too nosy, we must get her away before she finds out. He fabricated an excuse, Elric isn't in a condition to see anyone right now. Tasha scoffed and asked, really? Sean tried to usher her off, then please don't bother the doctor and go back, but she tightened her grip on his wrist and wouldn't let go. Little brother, Tasha's aura radiated a threatening intensity as she asked, are you ordering your sister around? Then she directly proposed, let's continue our conversation. What happened with the right to excavate the dragon's lair? Sean stared blankly at the girl scowling and smiling before him, thinking to himself, the dragon's lair? I'd forgotten this witch is obsessed with dragons. Tasha pressed on when she saw Sean's silence. No one has claimed it yet, right? He ground his teeth and forced out each word, that. Sean's expression went awkward. He broke into a sweat as the final words were spoken. It was Elric's decision. Tasha frowned and stared at him, then replied curtly as the 2 of them threatened each other with their auras, there's no choice then. She still held Sean's wrist tightly. After a moment she finally decided to release it. Tasha turned and left, not forgetting to leave a few instructions. Contact me when your friend wakes. Tasha's words continued to spill out, her tone growing more threatening. If you don't contact me first. She made a gun shape with her hand as she finished, then prepared to take a beating, little brother. When Tasha finally departed, horrific images crowded Sean's mind. He shivered and thought, hurry and do something, Elric. Then that weak but familiar voice sounded, young master. Sean asked again, and Carl, coughing up blood and trembling, stammered, has she left? The bloody scene made Sean startle. The chatter echoed throughout the city. The heir of that prestigious magical family is unconscious. The streets were bustling with criers, extra, extra. Who will get the right to excavate the dragon's lair? A hooded man stopped at a stall and said, Sean is handling everything well for him. The man caught sight of something and exclaimed with interest, well, who do we have here? Holding the paper in his hand, he muttered the bold headline, our rector is quite photogenic, isn't he? Turns out it's Elric, he sneered inwardly, enjoy laughing while you can, rector. Elsewhere a voice rang out, congratulations, rector. A man bowed and spoke obsequiously to the man seated there. Now you can do as you wish, Barracks replied. Don't rush, the man said in a low voice, the election hasn't even started yet. Rivern, the bespectacled man, continued flattering, I was too hasty, I can't fully grasp the urge to protect the Academy's future and your students, rector. Barracks couldn't help feeling pleased at these words, truly, I told you I'm not yet the rector. He went on to ask, by the way, what's the condition of that student Elric? Rivern promptly replied, I heard he's barely clinging to life. He sipped his tea and said nonchalantly, oh dear, what bad luck. Then he suddenly looked up with a question, but if he wakes up it'll be a big problem, we should hire a few assassins. The atmosphere changed instantly when that remark was made, silence. Barrack's eyes turned threatening as he glared at Rivern. He stammered in fear, I'm sorry. Pleased by the response, the mood around Barracks eased almost immediately. There will be a professorship opening after the election. He wondered who would fill that seat. Rivern, hearing this, couldn't help but feel curious. Indeed, Barrack's admonition continued, reminding him how to act. I'm just the rector, I don't know what's happening outside the academy. Rivern gave a single sound of understanding. Then he loudly pledged while bowing deeply, I will not disappoint you. Barracks smiled with satisfaction at his display. Elsewhere, in the darkness of night, a hooded figure was hiding behind a wall. Elric smiled and removed his hood. Elric smiled and removed his hood. Then he looked up and murmured, "All right, let's begin." His eyes shone with a mesmerizing blue as Elric pondered. With his mind's eye he could see beyond the world, and his vision was briefly washed in a pale blue. If I can find the hidden space, Elric calculated as he reached forward and channeled the mana from the dragon heart into it. Elric calculated as he reached forward and channeled the dragon heart mana into it. I can cast spells without complex incantations. A stream of red energy followed by yellow and green simultaneously appeared. Hope that's enough. He moved at high speed. In an instant he shot upward, then slammed down powerfully, creating an explosion in the air. Elric thought, I'm finally at the starting line. He took a deep breath, then looked up at the moon and concluded, the first step is fine, I'm finally at the starting line. Elric murmured and broke into a bright smile. Mephisto's voice rang out in the silent air, mocking, pathetic. This is all the magic you can use even with my power? Just a simple leap? Are you using tricks? Although irritated by him, Elric couldn't deny the words. He was right, I need to be faster, stronger. Feeling ignored, Mephisto grew furious and pointed at him, shouting, You bastard, how dare you ignore me while I'm speaking? In my time, humanity, demons, even the dragonkin trembled when I spoke. Despite the demon lord nagging in his ear, Elric's thoughts were focused on more important matters. There is something called a hidden consciousness within true dragon magic. His hands glowed as Elric employed formative power. The other hand did the same as he pondered aloud. In an instant Elric interlaced his hands, and the power swelled to activate the spell. Mephisto beside him sensed the power too. His expression was displeased. And then the incantation slipped out. Jump! Immediately power surged from his feet. It gradually lifted him off the ground. Watching this, Mephisto's face betrayed astonishment. Impossible. Elric shot forward like a rocket after the command, flying. Elric's eyes flared a strong, vibrant blue as he used his power. Below him now lay the city. In an instant Elric hovered midair, looking down at the glittering lights with delight. But at that moment his power cut out and he began to fall freely, too high. A smile crossed his face as he thought, wonderful, simple but highly effective. Then he used the flying spell again and shot off like a rocket. Alright, once more. Mephisto was now following closely behind. He frowned in displeasure observing his companion. A mere kid who just learned magic is already using hidden consciousness, dual magic. Speaking of the age-old enemies of the Melvinger demon realm, Mephisto continued comparing. Even the most formidable Melvingers might not match this fellow. Then his thoughts halted as he remembered someone. No, there must be. The silhouette of someone cloaked in white appeared. The person's features gradually revealed themselves. Just one individual. A person who resembled Elric as he is now. Mephisto flew and admonished himself. Oh no, I shouldn't think that. His gaze hardened with resolve as thoughts formed. At all costs, before he grows any stronger, I must seize that body and crush this dangerous seed. Mephisto hurriedly calculated. Is there a way? On the other side, Elric kept concentrating on flying forward. He also had his own thoughts. The hidden consciousness is wonderful, but it's still hard to harness alone. His hands unconsciously clenched tighter. To grow stronger I must understand the core of dragon magic. I need a teacher who can keep the secret. At that moment he thought of Barracks. In the academy already controlled by Barracks, there was no one capable of teaching him. Elric's feet touched the ground. He stopped in the middle of a forest and continued calculating. It had to be at least someone on par with Hexagram, but there was no way they'd accept him as a disciple. Unbidden, Elric remembered someone. If the man were still alive. But he deftly kept the thought fleeting, not letting himself delve deeper. No, not even my father or uncle. Nearby, Mephisto had been standing with his arms folded, angrily stamping out the seedling the whole time. I don't even have feet. Elric seemed to realize something. Wait, he stood up and spoke to him. The words he uttered successfully caught Mephisto's attention. Hey Mephisto, Elric smiled and made a bold proposal. Could you teach me magic? I just thought of this. You're the most suitable to be my teacher. The proposal momentarily threw the demon lord off balance. What did you say? What is that? He turned away petulantly and refused to say another word. But Elric didn't know that Mephisto was sneering as he spoke again. Mephisto, turning his head, asked indifferently, what's in it for me if I do that? Elric grinned and explained, are you not convinced? If you agree, it'll benefit you more than harm. I'll make you a new vessel through alchemy. That persuasion immediately met his skepticism. You think a mere human can craft a vessel for me? In response to Mephisto's concern, Elric gave a blunt answer, then make me strong enough to do it. Surprisingly, Mephisto answered seriously, still no, not enough. Elric's expression twisted as he replied, what can you do if I never become stronger? Out of options, Elric relented and in a low voice proposed, then suggest other conditions. He expected Mephisto to eagerly set demands, but instead was met with a cold splash, I refuse. Mephisto said indifferently, with perfect logic, why would I enlighten you? I might consider it if you become one of my kind. He finished and opened his eyes to appraise Elric's expression. Mephisto took great pleasure watching Elric's flustered face. Look at that confused face, it pleases me. So you've been mocking me all this time? The more he thought about it, the greater his delight, and Mephisto's lips involuntarily curled into a smile, though I'm still too weak to devour him, if I secretly use dark arts on him while teaching. An extremely enticing scenario formed in Mephisto's mind. He would grow ever stronger while his soul became infiltrated by dark magic. By then, I will devour him. His smile widened as thoughts of him escalated by the second. Now kneel and beg me to take you as my disciple, know your place and obediently become my vessel. Which foolish Melvinger could fail to see the truth slapped in his face? But a second later Elric swore loudly, oh, fuck off. Mephisto's face instantly contorted in shock at those words. Elric then retorted, listen, Jussi. The unexpected phrase left Mephisto brain-dead and frozen. Huh? Elric reminded again, demands must have limits. His voice dropped for a moment, becoming dangerous as he spoke again, don't you understand what situation you're in? With that, Elric leaned in close to the stunned Mephisto. What? In an instant Mephisto seemed greatly diminished compared to that arrogant smile, and it left him unwilling to accept it. You. Mephisto snapped angrily and lunged to strike him. You damned bastard. But Elric merely quietly mouthed a silent command. Immediately Mephisto's mouth was locked, he couldn't produce any coherent sound. Seeing this, Elric couldn't help but exclaim with satisfaction, oh ho, a success beyond expectation. Frustrated at being silenced, Mephisto kept pointing at him and shouting, though the words were only meaningless noises. Elric couldn't help blurting, oh my, you're being loud. The more Mephisto thought, the more indignant he became. There's no way I could be subdued by a mere hidden consciousness seal. Unexpectedly, Elric issued another command to him, such acute action. In an instant Mephisto's dignity completely vanished as he posed like an adorable rabbit. All of Elric's senses were instantly tortured to the point of blood spurting out. He couldn't hold back his nausea. Ugh, my eyes, oh Lord. Mephisto beside him was already so furious he was in tears but could do nothing. Elric deeply regretted his request as he watched Mephisto. Why did I ask him to do that disgusting thing? I feel like I'll vomit if I look any longer. He forced himself with all his might to restrain it. Calm down, I don't want to see that again. Fine, if you change your mind, write down all the explanations about the hidden consciousness magic here and I'll dispel it for you after I finish reading. Right now Mephisto's head was full of rebellious thoughts. You think I'll compromise with just that? Me, who endured being sealed for 1,000 years. Elric merely stretched and muttered, completely indifferent to them, so should I use this time to train? Night quickly fell, Mephisto remained busy with those thoughts that could never reach Elric's ears. I will generously forgive you if you admit your mistake. Another morning arrived, the next day Mephisto's patience grew thin and his anxiety larger. He should be the one begging me to teach him magic by now. Another day passed into the next, Mephisto was restless with these murky thoughts. What's wrong with me? Time moved on day after day, Mephisto had completely given up and even considered surrendering first. After all, I'll teach him anyway. Should I pretend to compromise? But the pride of a demon lord would not allow it. No, I cannot lose. Thus the pen in his hand trembled and stopped after writing a few words. The basic principle of the hidden consciousness seal is. Seeing Mephisto writhing like that, Elric couldn't help but snort with laughter. PFF, did you have to go that far? That mocking laugh of his drove Mephisto's anger to extremes. No, I am Demon Lord Mephisto. The demon within him was unleashed and resolved. Never will I hand it over to a human. Suddenly a voice from Elric cut through Mephisto's grand rhetoric. Huh, what's this? He studied the words on the paper intently while Mephisto sat collapsed on all fours like an old dog. Why am I acting like his pup? Elric pursed his lips and carefully examined the characters written on the page. the basic principle of the hidden consciousness magic is ancient knowledge I couldn't find in any book. He rubbed his hand over the inked characters and then uttered a compliment. Very good, shouldn't you be happy to be helping me? Elric kindly mouthed the command to undo the cute transformation, then reminded him, oh, and the information behind this. A wry smile appeared on his face as he pointed to the compiled content. Could you write it in more detail? Perhaps I'll let you speak. Aren't you a bit bored from not being allowed to talk? Those words struck Mephisto's pride directly, making him feel like he might explode with rage. You damned bastard. Elric lost control and shouted at him, what the hell is this? Don't you know you should write more than the day before? Mephisto answered with meaningless sounds. What kind of damnation decided that? Still, Elric patiently suggested, could you write several times a day, adding a little each time? I'll lift the gag for 3 days, how about that, are you willing? He followed with a string of other unreasonable demands that made Mephisto grow so angry he trembled. By the way, your handwriting is awful, write neater. Actually, multiple times isn't enough, just write it all at once. Have you ever considered teaching me some ultimate technique? He promised himself and imagined a splendid scene, wait and see. The dark arts hidden in these notes will utterly tear apart the body and soul of anyone ignorant enough. Elric's train of thought began, I've only learned the first part. When he cast that magic, but only with the scale of that power far exceeded Mephisto's expectations, so much power. He pressed his lips together in disbelief as he watched the scene before him, this is impossible. Why is there no sign of the dark art activating? I clearly put it in there. At that moment Elric suddenly spoke, cutting off his thoughts. What's with your expression, Mephisto? Elric cast a sidelong glance and confronted Mephisto, holding him completely in his hand. There's a clear intention on your face to do something shady with my body, isn't there? But nothing happened. Are you disappointed? He immediately turned his head to avoid it, his voice growing somewhat anxious. I don't understand what you're saying. Elric smiled and replied, do you think I'm so stupid that I'll learn whatever you hand me without questioning? He leaned in, keeping that friendly smile as he spoke again. That's fine, anyway thanks, you helped me reach a new level. Mephisto seethed with fury, so you know, damn it, all this damned stuff. Elric flipped through the notebook repeatedly, anything else? I'm getting stronger and don't want to reuse anything. Mephisto couldn't hold back and loudly demanded, are you dreaming, you human? He calmly raised a hand and said, fine, gag again. He immediately got a satisfying reply from Mephisto, nothing else. Elric opened his eyes wide and, surprised, asked, what? Mephisto continued explaining, though his face still showed annoyance, aside from my true consciousness seal magic, there's nothing else I can teach you. The wind rustled, as if blowing something away from Elric. His expression went blank for a moment as he tried to digest the words Mephisto had fed into his head, the true consciousness seal. Did he mean the highest level mind seal magic beyond the divine voice of the holy seals? Only then did Mephisto fold his arms, still looking down on him as he warned, you can't fully understand it at your current level, you might go mad. Though irritated and scratching his head, he couldn't deny it, he wasn't lying. Now what? Mephisto spoke again, I'll kindly enlighten you, the magic can only be perfected on the battlefield. This idea made Elric's eyes widen in astonishment. That's the fate of the Melvinger family to this day. A new truth opened, magic can only be perfected on the battlefield, which also ended that line of memory. It was the Melvinger family motto, those who would continually protect the continent from demons. Elric pondered, remembering the haggard image of his father, who had taught him and his sister about the Melvinger family's honor over the territory ravaged in the war with the demons. He recalled every detail carefully, though his father said nothing, he had been gravely wounded by the aftermath of the war. Watching the flag flutter in the dusk light, Elric reflected that he still remembered the days fighting at his father's side as a mage. The serious face of that man appeared once more. Afterward came the image of a mischievous boy speaking up, Father, when I go to battle someday, I'll be able to use those super cool spells like you, right? Great Mage Elric is coming. At that, the man dodged his words, that. And before Elric could press further, a voice sounded from behind. Elric, the woman behind him said with a smile, your mother told you already, if you want to become a powerful mage, what must you do? To that question Elric puffed his cheeks and pouted, replying, study. The answer pleased her greatly, yes, study. Then the woman continued to admonish, you can't just put on a ridiculous act of being a powerful mage like your father. I didn't tell you to outshine him, become the greatest mage even before he becomes the continent's strongest. At that moment Elric's father gently interjected, my lady, I'm still head of the family, but his remark only provoked his wife's anger, my respected husband. She went on to scold her husband, stop giving the children illusions. Honestly, no Melvinger man knows how to listen. The lecturing continued, now our household always obeys their mother. Yet he found a moment when she wasn't looking to lean in close to Elric and whisper, still, magic should be perfected on the battlefield, my child. But the moment those words were spoken, his figure vanished. His mother spoke up again, Elric, make sure you finish reading the research summary on the relationship between ancient formation systems and the new era linguistic system by the end of the day. Okay, Hayes, watch Elric for me. Then came the image of a boy being dragged away by his sister, bawling, no, Mom, don't. I want to play with father today. Ow, sis, my ear's about to rip off, let me go, damn it, over here. Elric's father spoke timidly, my lady, studying is good, but they're still just children. She replied with the sternest of looks, that's because you spoil the boy and give him bad habits, like father, like son, she snapped. The sunset gradually fell, accompanied by the man's rueful exclamation. But then a heart-wrenching cry pierced the night. Reality slammed into Elric and his sister like a violent wave. Their father's illness worsened and his mother, who cared for him day and night, suddenly collapsed. The father drew his final breaths beside her, and they passed away peacefully together. The man's face was strangely haggard as he uttered his parting words, I'm sorry, my love. You always shone brighter than anyone in this world, it's all my fault. The gaunt woman beside him tried to reply with a gentle smile, don't say that. Since meeting you and having our good children, there hasn't been a day I wasn't happy. Their hands intertwined and he continued, thank you, you raised our children well. You truly are a wonderful mother. Then the mother addressed her elder daughter, Hayes, are you there? She bowed her head and answered tersely, yes. Her small body trembled in waves as she listened to her mother's last words, take care of your little brother for me. I'm sorry, and thank you. On the other side, Elric's father also whispered his final words to him, Elric, I'm sorry. Your magic blockage is my fault. But the boy, who was his older son then, could only cry and keep calling, Father. Tears streamed down as Elric poured out his feelings, I'm so scared, how could you leave like this, Father? He begged them desperately, if Father is gone, what will my sister and I do? But suddenly, a gaunt yet warm hand pressed against Elric's cheek and the flowing tears stopped of their own accord. He continued to soothe, looking back, compared to the time I spent as a battle mage, I was far happier in the days I was the father of my children. Elric's teary eyes widened, his small hand reaching out as he listened to those words, you don't need to become a mage. I'm just a man whose breath is failing. His words grew so faint they were barely audible, I hope you will live happily with those around you. That warm hand lost its life and fell away. It landed on the bed with a soft sound. At the same moment life departed from the two of them, and the child's broken, staccato cry rang out again, Father. Elric's face froze in disbelief, and then a heartrending cry broke the night, Father. That was the end of the memory stream and Elric returned to the present. But Father, you were wrong to tell me I didn't need to become a mage, if I'm not strong enough, I'll be cast aside in this reality. His hand unconsciously clenched with each thought, that's why I must become stronger, so no one can ever turn their back on me again. His cloak fluttered in the wind as Elric stepped forward and spoke, magic can only be perfected on the battlefield. Yes, what I need most now is real combat experience. But a question arose, where should I go? The Blood Spirit Forest, full of phantom-type monsters. That place is far too dangerous. Elric considered the second option, the Goblin Caves are too crowded already. Where to go? At that moment his father's teachings sprang to mind, listen, there are hidden vaults scattered across the continent where our ancestors lived. That became Elric's compass, yes, that's the place. And the present day him spoke once he'd chosen a destination, let's go, Mephisto. He folded his arms and asked briefly, where to? Elric answered curtly, I'll head to the Yeti territory, the Yeti Plateau. Sunlight filtered through the leaves and dappled the ground below. Elric's figure was bathing in a stream, completely naked and at one with nature. As he dove in he thought to himself that it could be a problem if his identity were revealed, he must change his appearance. Thinking that, Elric immediately cast a verbal command, "Radiate Mind." Water behind him began to rise. It slowly covered his body to just the right point. Elric ordered, "Cut," and a lock of his hair flew away on the wind. The water and wind swept the stray strands away. Leaving the pond unnervingly calm, Elric again spoke the transformation. With a new appearance quickly dawned, he approved with satisfaction, "Seems fine now." A completely different Elric than before had been successfully fashioned. A city in the midst of a cold winter sky. Voices suddenly rang out somewhere, "A team is preparing to depart. You're in luck, the guidance branch." Rogan intoned and pointed as he guided, "No one goes to the plateau anymore, it's surprising so many suddenly want to go. My team is over there." No sooner had he finished than the door was pushed open. "Ah, they're here, perfect timing." As the figures from outside entered, exclamations rose from below, "Looks like we have new people, huh?" Elric watched the newcomers with extreme caution. He muttered, identifying each person's role and number. For herbalists, 3 demon hunters. His gaze settled on those wearing hoods and 5 people concealing their energy. At that moment a smiling boy near him spoke up, "Then I'll introduce myself. In our tribe we name people based on their birthday. My name is Manhwa, which means Monday morning. You're probably wondering what good that does. Today is actually Monday morning this week. In common terms it's Tuesday, so as long as you stick close, you won't be in danger." In a corner, Mephisto was already furious at these offhand words. "That brat talks so much, one day I'll tear that mouth off." Elric was more relaxed. He raised his hand and cautiously said, "Ah yes, Manhwa, may I buy a communication crystal?" Elric's request immediately sparked chatter among those present. "What for?" "Our village has no crystals, you could use something like pigeons or send letters." Manhwa, still smiling brightly, replied, "That reminds me of a hilarious incident involving pigeons and letters. What bad luck." "Come on." Ignored though he was, the boy stubbornly trailed after them, a sight that made Mephisto and Elric break out in a sweat and secretly admire him. "What a shame, I'll tell you on the way. Let's go." His expression then was uglier than any rivalry score when he remembered something important. She'd be furious if he didn't contact her soon. "Things are getting more complicated, but I've already told Sean, he'll handle it. Let's go." His expression was grotesque as he recalled an important matter. She'd be furious if he didn't contact her soon. "Things are getting more complicated, but I've already told Sean, he'll take care of it." Voices rose as the group moved, and then a pigeon suddenly dove into a chimney. Before he could realize it, with that information the chimney must belong to the one who stole the lover of the neighbor living next to the grandmother of the village elder here. The Yeti Plateau. Mephisto, walking beside Elric, finally commented, "I have a feeling this place is familiar, it's where the Yetis live." Hearing that, Elric's curiosity was piqued again. "You know about Yetis? You were here before." He explained casually, though his words were a bit coarse, "Of course, they're scum who dared to defy us." This brain-exploding claim made Elric involuntarily exclaim, "Are Yetis demons?" But Mephisto immediately objected to that blunt conclusion, "Don't lump me in with that trash." Elric's eyes widened in astonishment as he absorbed the statement. Just monsters, yet somehow linked to the demon realm, astonishing. Still, their former king was truly useful. He must have received the demon lord's blessing, though his fate was not so fortunate. Elric couldn't help glancing at Mephisto, thinking that the Yetis once had a ruler in the past. Mephisto spoke again, "His tomb is probably still somewhere around here." This confident assertion surprised Elric. "Do you know where it is?" But in response to his eager tone, Mephisto answered non-committally, "Even if it's still here, it's likely been looted." Elric froze where he stood. If Yetis are demons, their tombs would surely have some connection to the family's hidden vault. His own memories were stirred again. The vault is the ancestors' refuge, built to protect the family's heritage. Back then he gently stroked Elric's head and told him, "Elric, when you grow up and become head of the family, go to the Yeti Plateau first." Those entreaties were spoken, placing every hope on the little boy. "Confirm the family's entire heritage there and pay respect to our ancestors." Now Elric examined the item in his hand, quietly wondering what the family's legacy might be and whether he could learn more about this magical pendant if he went there. At this moment Manhwa led the way, still chattering non-stop. According to the tribe's legends passed down through generations, the first Yeti appeared after being abandoned by her husband and left on this plateau. That woman died. His rambling words kept reaching Mephisto's ears, making his face involuntarily contort. After taking her revenge, she met Yukiana who suddenly appeared, and that's how the story began. Mephisto angrily turned to Elric and cursed loudly, "Can't you use magic to shut that name up? Look, my ear is bleeding." Elric only replied, "Endure it, what ghost bleeds anyway?" At that moment he was busy thinking about the snow demons, and about the Yeti the other kept mentioning. Why haven't they shown up yet? Minghwa's voice continued with its usual gusto, "All right everyone, the road ahead will be tough. Before we proceed we should eat something." A warm fire was lit. They split into small groups, each kindling a little fire to keep warm. At that moment someone approached with a request, "May we sit by your fire?" Elric's gaze immediately swept over the mysterious newcomer. He quickly concluded that the man was as strong as a noble knight, then continued to watch the movements of the strangers who had approached them. Elric noted that they merely surrounded the fire as they said, they didn't seem to be targeting him. Could they be on some secret mission? His gaze stopped on a man in a blue cloak who differed from the rest. Was he the leader? He didn't seem like it. Unexpectedly, this person directly removed his hood. Elric's eyes widened in astonishment, and the members of his own party couldn't help but be surprised. For before them stood a beautiful girl with long blue hair. "Thank you, we'll treasure it," Elric thought in amazement. Female. At that moment, one of the group began to whistle. Along with him, another joined in teasing, "Why hide such a pretty face, young lady? Oh my, I never thought I'd be lucky enough to have this experience here." But as soon as the words fell, a sword was drawn, and struck straight at the face of the one who had spoken lewdly. In a single motion the other moved, and when the man realized it, the sword's tip was at his throat, ready to pierce. The other's eyes were dark with murderous intent as he said, "You offended a lady with those words, redeem yourself with your life." A chaotic scene immediately erupted, forcing the girl to command, "Chen, lower your weapon." Elric just laughed, enjoying the skirmish unfolding before him. He dared flirt with a noble? Does that head even contain a brain? Unexpectedly, Mephisto suddenly leaned his face close to Elric's, and they instantly turned their heads to look back, only to be surprised once more by what they sensed. On this side, Chen still held the sword at the throat of the lewd speaker, trying to justify the action. "But milady, these ruffians." Yet the girl insisted that he lower his sword. A momentary hesitation appeared on Chen's face. Before he sheathed his sword back into its scabbard, suddenly Elric's voice cut through the scene, "Everyone, run." Chen looked over in confusion. The two who had been joking also turned to look at him. "What?" Chen held his sword up to defend, and in an instant dozens of strikes came raining down on him from nowhere. Minghwa and the others couldn't help but be astonished. When they saw one person in the group struck, a large hole punched through his body. Chen shouted orders to the other members to protect the lady. They trembled as they stood between her and the attackers. On this side, Elric frowned and said, "This reminds me of the nest." Saying that, he moved quickly. Seeing dozens of arrows continuously fired his way, Elric couldn't help exclaiming, "So many." He stood watching them fly rapidly toward him, getting closer and closer. And now Elric used magic, uttering a single command, "Block." Instantly a layer of shield formed, stopping the projectiles that were coming. Elric broke into a sweat, his eyes sweeping the area searching for the other members. How are the others? Chen's people were struggling to hold off the attackers to protect the girl, while the common folk were almost all hit, crying out in pain. Blood spurted continuously along with broken cries of, "Help me, help me." They kept falling. Thud. Elric's expression hardened at the gruesome scene. On this side, Mephisto was also glancing toward one direction. The space was instantly flooded with an eerie red light, and it didn't take Mephisto long to recognize them as fools from the Blood-Eye tribe. Elric's eyes widened alertly as he charged into the forest. Very quickly golden spots indicating enemies appeared before him. The closer he got the clearer the lights became, and Elric recalled he had heard Yetis usually move in packs of 10. What struck his eyes now were gigantic, ferocious beasts. Elric's eyes widened in shock, his jaw unconsciously clenching as he thought, "But this is too many." Meanwhile Chen had already rushed in with a command, "Sweep them clean." A monster lunged to attack, leading to an all-out melee between humans and beasts. Mephisto watched from the side, remarking coldly that the first fight was a bit tough. Elric went to his side and called softly, "Mephisto, press on." Mephisto continued to sneer at the humans before him. "You're starting to feel fear now that it's time to fight, aren't you? Typical humans." And in an instant he regretted those words, for Elric cast a spell on him. "Shut up." Mephisto cried out in surprise, but Elric kindly reminded him, "This isn't the time for nonsense. I guess the Demon King is a bit absent-minded. At the same time Chen rushed forward with a thought in his head, they truly are astonishing. His gaze widened, sharp, as his sword strokes were delivered decisively and continuously. Meanwhile Elric silently admired him as he watched. This is how a knight optimizes his aura. Well, he frowned again, reminding himself he wanted to watch more, but this wasn't the time. An ambush is a real problem. Elric's gaze turned to the monsters hiding in the forest as he silently calculated, but these aren't all of them. Another pack of Yetis was waiting for a chance to ambush us. Everything could be in danger if we make the wrong decision now. He began to manipulate nearby objects to execute the plan he conceived, though the situation would change if he struck them first. Red lightning ran along Elric's body as he cast a transformation clearing spell, accompanied by an armament enhancement. In an instant, Elric successfully leapt atop the mass of monsters. It seemed using memory to store some enhancements had proven useful. They were moving relentlessly. One raised its head as it sensed Elric's presence. Its eyes widened as it looked at him, though he wasn't sure whether his attack would take effect. And the speed kept increasing. Elric stomped down right on the center of its head, to the astonishment of the one beside it. The others gaped in disbelief as well. Elric remained silent, fully focused on the plan before him. At least he could slow them down. He jumped down into the midst of the monsters, and then triggered an explosive spell, turning the surrounding space into a dazzling fireworks display. Elric glanced to one side, seeing one trying to lunge to attack. He countered with combustion. An instant wall of fire rose up, preventing them from closing on Elric, followed by shards of ice. They appeared from both sides, then flew off, transforming into blue sword-shaped forms. While the bewildered monsters had no idea what was happening, Elric cast his next technique, absorption. A glowing sword hewed down through the mass, successfully taking down another. Their bodies exploded behind him like Lunar New Year fireworks. The survivors trembled in fear when Elric spoke. Phew, only 2 left. Huh. He glanced at them and said softly, "Where do you think you're running off to?" Then, with a smile, Elric raised his hand and used a binding spell. Standing alone among the monsters, Elric said wearily, "Ha, I'm pretty great, aren't I?" He stomped on one and began issuing orders. "By the way, let's have a chat, Mephisto, Mephisto." Elric continued to tease the muted companion beside him. "Hey, you're still here, talk." When the mute was lifted, the first thing Mephisto spat out was a curse. "You crazy bastard, you really are." Elric simply mouthed one word gently, and Mephisto froze, not daring to risk saying another thing. Then Elric quietly demanded, "There's no time, interpret for me, now." His words left Mephisto baffled. "What are you talking about?" Elric then used Mephisto as a translation device to communicate with the monsters, telling them that if they revealed where their tribe was, he would spare them. Mephisto repeated what they said. They asked to be untied. But Elric, cool and suave, replied, "Why would I trust that?" Unexpectedly, Mephisto suddenly took on a serious, low tone. "In this situation we should negotiate through dialogue rather than threats." With no choice, Elric had to indulge the thing. "I've released it, tell it to speak quickly." Mephisto whispered intently into the monster's ear. Its expression changed instantly. This raised Elric's suspicions and he quickly used his translation skill, realizing Mephisto was trying to betray them. "Now we'll pretend to cooperate with this rotten one," Elric murmured, "my lord." The monster suddenly roared ferociously. A piercing sound followed as Elric struck it in one blow. A spell fired from his finger. Elric's face plainly showed horror. That was nearly a disaster. He watched the two individuals desperately dodge, then offered a cold smile and a request. With that icy smile he said, "So let's talk things over again." No one knew what they discussed. Only agonized screams could be heard ringing out. Afterward Elric remarked to Mephisto, "That gullible snowman almost died because of you, my lord, thanks for guiding me." Mephisto still protested vigorously, "Die, all of you." Suddenly Elric pressed his hand to his chest and his body began to tremble. He thought to himself as he felt his heartbeat, "The dragon heart contains dragon and demon king magic. I can only release 3% of its mana from here." Elric calculated inwardly that if he unleashed the full strange mana, his body would not withstand it and would burst. He followed the monster to some place. At his current level it was truly dangerous to fight as before. Elric's hand clenched reflexively as he promised himself he could not retreat. Elric's expression was one of determination. If he gave up now, how could he build a lineage? Elric's gaze suddenly flicked to one side as he continued to ponder. He unconsciously remembered the girl with the blue hair. would that noble lady be safe? A spray of bright red blood burst out. Chen's sword and his body were both covered in blood. They were giving each other first aid. The girl rushed over in extreme worry. Chen, did you see someone here a moment ago? Chen inwardly thought simply that he had likely died running off alone or was hiding somewhere. Yet on the surface he smiled and said the opposite. Perhaps he escaped safely. The girl did not doubt the words at all. Probably, right? Her eyes turned to the sky. Meanwhile, Elric was on guard here, ready to face something, completely unaware of her silent prayer. Please be safe, she prayed. Before him stood a pack of yetis. Elric frowned seriously and said, don't stare at me with such bloodthirsty eyes. Let me see your chieftain. The monsters before him growled. Then they all shouted in unison while making a path for Elric to step forward. One of them slowly walked toward him. Elric's eyes widened in astonishment. Before him stood the clan chief, a creature gigantic compared to the others. Elric kept his composure as he spoke. I have a few questions. The monster remained silent and did not answer. He already had an attack readied in his hand, prepared to unleash it at any moment. It would be better if he didn't have to go that far. But his gaze was highly vigilant as he considered that if talking failed, that would be the quickest way to take down this chieftain. At that moment a voice rang out from across, with green eyes. The Yeti was actually speaking to him. What is your name? This move made Elric falter for an instant, but he managed to utter his name, Elric Melvinger. The Yeti was quiet for a moment before suggesting, come with me. It led Elric along with it to some place. It stopped there and began to explain, our tribe has a legend. Elric couldn't help but ask curiously, what legend? The Yeti spoke in a low voice while Elric's eyes widened in astonishment. Long ago a great king ruled this mountain. He glanced at Mephisto and the latter nodded slightly in agreement. The Yeti continued, that king said there was only one person he recognized as a friend. It recalled that old meeting, the one with eyes that shone green, and Melvinger was that person's name. The mind-blowing truth made Elric's eyes widen in shock. Could his ancestor really have been friends with the Snow Kings? The monster went on, our chieftains continue to watch over their homes according to the king's wishes. Elric's eyes narrowed as he asked, where is that home? It fell silent for a moment, then pointed in one direction, there. Before them yawned a sheer cliff with no visible bottom. They both went to its edge and looked down. Elric couldn't hide his amazement as he looked down and thought to himself, is there really a house beneath this cliff? In response, he saw an eerie darkness that made him increasingly horrified. Yet the most surprising thing was that he could confirm, absurd as it sounded, that there truly was a house down there. Elric's gaze remained fixed as he continued to peer down. A few gusts of wind arose from below, the airflow increasing. The Yeti chief then explained, once a year, when the winds calm, we go down there, but no one has ever returned. Mephisto nearby jeered, all that magic and you can't manage even a little reconnaissance. But at that moment Elric had a question. How did he stand beside that cliff when no one had the necessary skills? Then Elric himself answered, true, it's reckless given my current abilities, but if I only stand here now, I won't progress another step. He calmly stepped forward and continued, and it seemed the ancestors wanted to witness their descendants' skill. Mephisto beside him questioned suspiciously, what are you going to do? Without further explanation, Elric hurled himself down. He looked up with a bright smile and explained, I have to answer their call. Watching Elric fling himself downward, Mephisto couldn't help but shout, this madman. He kept berating him as Elric fell, are you really jumping like that? Only then did he realize his decision might be wrong. Damn it, the wind here is stronger than I thought. Unexpectedly, Mephisto jumped down with him. Quickly he flew alongside Elric's fall and warned, you madman, focus or you'll die. Those words snapped him awake and eased him somewhat, all right, one more step. His face and body tensed, and he could feel he was within reach. Quickly the ground rushed up before Elric. He loudly issued the command, descend. The scenery below grew clearer and Elric made out the silhouette of a house. At that moment a golden light appeared at his feet. The light spread around, aiding his landing. With successive leaps, Elric finally managed to touch down. Rocks and soil were blown up around him as he hit the ground. Elric looked up and scanned the surroundings. A green light flashed in his eyes, full of vigilance. Then Elric collapsed onto the ground and exhaled, I really thought I was dead. Nonsensical voices suddenly sounded in the air. Hoo, I did it, right? Awesome, admit it. I admit it. Mephisto beside him could only marvel at this human's odd nature. After a moment Elric rose again, eyeing the house and muttering that it looked ordinary, like a thatch hut. Elric's hand trembled as he reached up, trying to touch it. But instead he touched a pale purple barrier, it seemed sealed by ancient magic. He then spoke to Mephisto beside him, "Try inputting spell mana." Mephisto obliged, "Melvinger." After that Elric repeatedly touched while reciting passwords that popped into his head: Demon Path Sect, Demon King, Tribe Demon Hunter, In Trust, Squirrel Eats Cake, Story Plus, DJ Dinosaur. But none yielded results. Instead Elric sank deeper into thought. Mana won't do, something like a key. A sudden idea flashed through his mind. Could it be? Elric slowly brought the seal in his hand close to the door. He pressed it against the barrier and realized they matched. The barrier immediately sucked in the seal. The door then slowly opened, prompting Elric to exclaim, "You sure know how to deceive." The interior space of this house was utterly different from the outside. Wow! He reached out and touched a book. His eyes widened uncontrollably as he recognized it. This one. Then, like a maniac, Elric darted around the area under Mephisto's irritated gaze. Basic doctrines of magical theory, practical books everywhere. Oh, there's elven and beast magic too, even dark magic, every kind of book is here. Observing his childlike enthusiasm, Mephisto couldn't help but remark, "It seems this is the abode of the Eastern Hand Great One." Elric, who had been circling, paused to clarify those 5 words, Eastern Hand Great One. Mephisto fell into thought. He pondered that person and the Snow King knew their ancestors and that there seemed to be a hidden story. Elric, as if realizing something, said, "This book." In his hands was a book titled The History of Melvinger. Elric curiously flipped through the pages, muttering lines visible on the old pages. "The mission of our house is to destroy demons." Old memories were stirred again. This exactly matched what he had once seen in a dream. His fingers traced the missing text on the book. What is this? This spot definitely requires certain conditions. A dense green aura surrounded Elric as he continued reading. The mission entrusted to the house by heaven can be accomplished. The letters of the book seemed to dance in the air. Consume demons, then consume fiends, if one can digest them properly. Dozens of possibilities crossed Elric's mind about whether a new harmony of demoncraft could form. Power suddenly erupted around him. A fierce light flashed in Elric's eyes, accompanied by persuasive whispers: "Eat the demon, ingest the demon, drink the demon." The sigil began to activate as well. It glowed brighter as if polished, and relentless commands issued forth: "Eat, swallow, drink the demon." Blue light struck the sigil and reflected outward. That triggered residual images from the past. If so, all demons would be contained within the body, and thus a new mage would emerge, the first descendant to demons, breaking the decree and passing the Demonpath's test. From now on it would truly begin. At that moment Elric found himself lying on a meadow. He snapped awake, puzzled. Where is this? As Elric pushed himself up, a voice sounded. "It seems you are the promised descendant in a distant future chosen to receive our decree." A figure appeared behind him. Elric slowly turned around to face them. A beard framed the jaw and a pair of spectacles rested on the face. Elric, on guard, stammered, "You are." The man bowed slightly and introduced himself, Otto von Melvinger. He stated solemnly, "I am the one who guides and tests the descendants, the instructor." About him, Otto von Melvinger established the Melvinger family's demoncraft system centuries ago. Across generations only a few ancestors brought renown to the house. He smiled at Elric's expression. "It seems you know of me, do you not?" Elric blankly replied with a question. Could the ancestor be the Eastern Hand Great One? Otto didn't know how to explain. Instead he answered with another question. "None of my descendants know that alias. Where did you hear it?" Then Elric remembered Mephisto and confessed to Otto. That was what the Demon King Mephisto said. "Where has that name gone?" Otto looked at him suspiciously. "Mephisto is the Demon King of original sin." Elric did not hide it. "Yes, just a stupid infernal, that's all." Otto stepped closer and placed a hand on Elric's shoulder, saying, "So the first demon you was Mephisto?" Otto smiled with satisfaction at Elric before him. "A truly talented descendant has arrived. Should I raise the difficulty of the decree?" Mentioning Mephisto, at that time Mephisto muttered incessantly, "Who dares insult me? Off with their limbs." Elric focused on what Otto was saying and asked, "What exactly is the decree? You said you would guide, what does that mean?" Otto gently ruffled his hair and explained, "You're curious about many things, aren't you?" His gaze was full of affection for the junior. "You may write freely, the rest can come later. Why rush to record complicated matters?" Elric's face involuntarily flushed. He wondered himself why he felt embarrassed. Otto then spread his hands wide. Lights began to appear there and gradually transformed into a magic circle. "We've prepared something like a magic wheel." He held it straight ahead as he muttered an explanation. Once it starts turning and lands a hit, it cannot be stopped, so I don't hand it to anyone lightly, no matter how long it takes, I must thoroughly test the descendant. Otto continued to guide Elric patiently. Since you passed my test, from here on the choice is yours. Both of their hands bore the formation, and Otto posed the question to him. Stop the magic wheel or let it spin. The formation was entrusted to Elric while he still stood dazed. Elric did not know what the house's decree entailed. If he took the wrong path, his life could vanish. Elric's hand clenched instinctively. The invisible chain was thus broken when he resolved himself, so this was the last chance to escape. Otto spoke sternly, all right, I respect your choice. But Elric declared firmly, I will rebuild the house. Those words surprised Otto somewhat, and Elric repeated his decision, I will carry on the will of our ancestors, the great heroes. I will leave my name on this land as a great mage. Elric's momentum surged. That was the dream he had long nurtured. Elric pushed the formation forward with his hand. He succeeded in creating an explosion just like Otto had. Not just once, Elric did it several times. Otto's eyes betrayed his astonishment as he witnessed Elric's display. He slapped the boy's shoulder, remarking, well done. Oh, this boldness, our descendant could do it. Elric, naive, was struck and whimpered, ow, that hurts. Before them the vast field remained as Otto continued his demonstration, so then, Elric spread his hands apart, and with them came a reversal of the weather. In an instant the warm scene was replaced by snow-capped mountains pouring down relentless snowfall. Elric was astonished. Shivering and struggling, Elric asked, where is this? Otto explained in a low voice, this is the site of the first decree test. He quickly grasped the implication of Otto's words, so here he would have to undergo this test. If so, compared to now, thinking of a future dominating millions made Elric's mouth involuntarily curve into a smile, perhaps he'd become much stronger. Otto did not miss the small gesture, you're smiling. That's a good mindset for someone about to take the test. He then directed Elric to gaze into the distance, look there. Puzzled, Elric asked what he should look at, but Otto only insisted, farther. Elric complied and soon spotted something. Look deeper, Otto urged. Thick, black currents of aura were swirling together. It was a shape in the center that was hard to discern, and Elric couldn't help asking, what is that? A silhouette of an immensely powerful being struck his eyes, and Otto answered, the Snow Mountain King. He explained to Elric that this figure was the first and also the last to unify the snow tribes, the ruler who dominated these snow mountains, a figure whose ambition drove the snow folk, who had been expelled from the demon clans, back toward the demon clans. He told Elric the past story of the Snow Mountain King, but the end was consumed by that very ambition, leaving him as a fallen demon, abandoned like a corrupted fiend. Elric's face grew even more blank as Otto continued stating the main purpose concerning that demon, the Snow Mountain King is the second demon you must swallow. He understood immediately and cried out in alarm, so I have to face that? Otto seemed about to correct him but only smiled instead of answering, no, more precisely, you must swallow it. Are you afraid? Then Otto's gaze returned to the Snow Mountain King as he assigned the task to Elric. Now you must swallow the demon and seize its root, the sigil. He asked in confusion, a sigil? Otto kindly enlightened the junior, those primal, dark emotions, fear, depression, and rage, emanate from the creature. They are existences formed from the ego born of thought, the dark ideas of the self linking together create the demon race. Elric's expression showed surprise as a sigil appeared on his hand. Each demon thus has its own dark thoughts, that is their class essence and symbol. The heart that stores those dark thoughts is called the sigil of the original sin Mephistopheles can be seen. It shifted from black to green before Elric's astonished eyes. This is the sigil of a demon king. Otto took the opportunity to explain his true aim. From now on you will hunt demons and seize their root sigils. He painted an enticing vision of what would happen if one swallowed a demon. Elric's face went blank for a moment. The demon's entire power would belong to you. He looked toward the Snow Mountain King's dwelling, calculating inwardly how strong he'd become if he acquired such formidable power. Then Elric quickly made up his mind, you won't know until you try. He used his skill to propel himself upward. Otto called after him, remember this. At the same time Elric already activated his second skill, arming himself, while Otto's words echoed through the air, not to defeat. Elric streaked through the thick black mist, accompanied by the final instruction, to swallow. Elric couldn't help but wonder inwardly, what exactly do they mean by eat and swallow? What is that supposed to mean? Very quickly, the streams of black aura struck his eyes. The Snow Mountain King soon sensed Elric's presence. That mana is me, Fies, to, Mel, Vin, Gur, was it? The Snow Mountain King's deep voice rang out, prove it. Otto replied. He, the instructor, halted. The Snow Mountain King's words were full of implication as his gaze fixed on the rapidly approaching Elric, our marshal. His eyes widened when he saw something. Black forms moved at high speed, obeying the Snow Mountain King's command, kill him. Blows struck at Elric's legs, forcing him to be on guard, while streams of black aura appeared. When the Snow Mountain King's minions all appeared before Elric, the warriors protecting their king, Elric scanned them and began to assess. There were dozens at a glance. In some ways they were different from the snow folk he'd faced before. His gaze settled on one in particular, and concern formed, especially that one. Could he defeat it with his current abilities? Elric pondered tactics. If I use only the original Sin Sigil with the Demon Lord's power, I think I could even catch that Snow Mountain King. The more he thought, the more irritated he became, swearing under his breath, damn it, if I don't know how to use it, it's just messy scribbling. At that moment the ringleader of the group roared threateningly, and they all lunged to attack Elric, forcing him to decide on a quick response. But this is the first test, so with the Demon Lord's power. A phrase Elric uttered before casting the skill, this won't count as cheating, right? Ignite. An instant, terrifying explosion erupted from him. The scale and firepower were anything but ordinary. But in a split second, Elric's eyes widened in horror, as an enemy spear suddenly thrust toward him, followed by an even larger explosion that sent the warriors flying apart. Elric raised both hands into the air, and traced an octagonal, bagua, pattern, erecting and driving it forward. Immediately after which a series of large, sharp ice blocks surged up from beneath the ground. They quickly thrust toward the warriors, giving them no time to evade. Elric's eyes began to brighten. He looked at the blood-red-eyed warriors standing before him, unflinching. Elric spoke. I heard you once belonged to the demon race but were cast out, he said calmly, concealing his emotions, so I assume you know that when you are weak, you are abandoned. Those words hit the warriors' sore spot. They looked at him with hatred. Elric silently told himself he must grow stronger. The blizzard grew fiercer by the moment, yet Elric remained undaunted. If I can become stronger, this kind of trial will be only the beginning. He then raised his hand and began to summon power. His eyes began to glow. Elric shouted, I'll smash it 100 times if I have to. Immediately after, a gigantic fireball formed by Elric blinded the surrounding space with its light. However, the next instant, the sparks of the orb were suddenly cleaved into hundreds of shards. That warrior swung his sword at Elric, forcing him to step back a few paces as he lost his balance. He was a little surprised by the warrior's strength. Then the giant fireball shattered, creating a massive explosion, its light scattering outward. Elric was suddenly hit in the abdomen, blood gushing out. The warrior sheathed his sword. Elric's blood still stained its blade damage. At this point he was exhausted and collapsed to the ground below. The warrior stepped closer to him. At this rate I'll lose. Blood dribbled from the corner of Elric's mouth. No, I can't fall at the very first trial. Yet he refused to give up and continued to stand and fight, even though his body could hardly bear it. A plume of green smoke rose from Elric's body. Then a loud noise rang out. Elric regained his strength and resumed fighting the warrior. He gritted his teeth, his expression growing more determined. I will draw more energy. The warrior's expression remained unchanged at Elric's refusal to quit. Then it swung a punch toward Elric. Suddenly, his eyes widened. The dragon heart. A shaft of white light suddenly appeared. Elric drove his sword through the warrior, leaving a huge wound, and cried out in ragged breaths. Elric stopped. He gave a soft chuckle. A wisp of black smoke drifted from his mouth. Shortly after, exhausted, Elric could only slump down to the ground. He sighed. Elric, whose eyes had been tightly closed, slowly opened them. Was this real? He looked around. All the warriors had turned into black smoke and were gradually dissolving into the air. No matter how he looked at it, the first round had been too harsh. Those black wisps began to thicken and coil together. Elric realized something was wrong. Damn it, his heart felt like it would explode. The soldiers were beginning to form again. What should he do? Elric turned his back. Before him a large mass of black smoke was twisting together, forming a dense black curtain. He shouted in fear, startled. The smoke lunged down, swirling around Elric. Then Elric looked down at his arm. There was a seal. It turned out the black smoke was being drawn into his tattooed arm. He looked at his arm and thought to himself, although it's fainter than Otto's seal, certainly a new seal has formed. I'm not sure what's happening, but the dragon heart energy that was about to explode has stabilized, and that's why the demons call their seals by their true names. Otto, who had somehow come to stand beside Elric, spoke, so if you want to use their power, you must know their true names. Elric asked puzzled, how do I find them? They won't just tell you their names. He continued to stare at the black smoke calmly, don't worry. The warriors reappeared from the black smoke once more. At the right moment, you will naturally sense it, Otto said. Elric exhaled deeply. Then he resumed summoning his power and continued fighting. The true name of these snow folk is cruel. Although I cannot explain it. A massive blizzard suddenly appeared in the sky. All I know is, the surroundings turned into mountain ranges covered by millennia-old ice and snow, the way to use the seal. Elric stood rooted before them, continuing to fight, wondering what their true name was. He gave a slight laugh, may you be cold and heartless. Then Elric summoned power, sending thousands of large rocks flying toward the warriors. The warriors were not intimidated and continued to attack Elric. Elric felt a bit tired. He staggered back a few steps, having used a bit too much energy. Yet his face still wore stubborn defiance. Is this the power of the seal? The warriors watched the falling rocks have no effect on them and began to laugh loudly. Elric couldn't believe it. He fell to the ground, and before losing consciousness he heard someone say, now there's only you left. Before passing out, Elric still wondered, why? The next moment, Elric suddenly sprang up, his face still filled with fear. He woke up inside an old library, thick books scattered all over the floor. His face full of terror, he stammered, asking, what just happened? Mephisto hovered beside him, speaking calmly, it seems you passed a rather tough trial. Elric looked at him, Mephisto. He still hovered nearby. I had hoped the quest would trigger, since you fell asleep when your pendant lit up. It seems it's not that easy. Elric, hearing that, was shocked to realize the dream he'd just had. Oh, a quest. So I'm not actually dead. He reached up and touched the blue tattoo on the back of his hand. He'd been too quick to trust the seal, he must have fainted after absorbing all the mana. Then Elric recalled what he'd experienced in the dream, and its power was far greater than he'd imagined. His hand still resting on the blue mark. If the incomplete seal of malice was already this strong, how much might the original sin's seal wield? But how am I to use them? Mephisto suddenly spoke, cutting off Elric's thoughts, maybe it's the seal of malice. He seemed to understand what Elric was thinking. It appeared the Great Eastern Hand had devised a rather strange scheme. Elric regained his composure and asked him, Mephisto, how do I use the seal of malice? He didn't answer but countered, I suppose he told you my true name. He recalled the stranger in the dream saying to him, did you think I'd tell you my name? Mephisto continued, his gaze flicking toward Elric, no matter how you insult me, you'll never gain anything from me. Caught out in his little scheme, Elric awkwardly scratched his head, I was just asking, no need to get so wound up. He looked at Mephisto still hovering there, thinking he knew what the demon would say, after all, seals are the most precious things to demons. Mephisto was turning away. If he allowed Elric to use the original sin's seal, it would mean his greatest trial had been stolen, unfortunate, but for now I won't touch it. With that thought, Elric pulled his sleeve down to cover the tattoo. Besides, the original sin seal belongs to a demon king. If I can't control the snow folk's power yet, there's no way I could handle a demon king's power. He stepped toward Mephisto, smiling brightly and holding out his hand. Mephisto, you said you know the Snow Mountain King, right? Mephisto turned back with a puzzled look. Why do you suddenly ask that? Elric explained, this place is his tomb, and it seems I have to capture him. Hearing that, Mephisto was slightly surprised. Huh. The next instant he turned and shouted, Otto von Melvinger, I know you're mad, but did he dare send something like you to seize an entity I've acknowledged? Elric was a little taken aback by his outburst. So about that, do you know any good way? Mephisto realized he'd spoken too much and stepped back, replying coldly, no. Elric continued to plead, come on, he's not even of the demon race anymore. At least tell me that much, will you? Hearing this, Mephisto grew angrier. What are you saying? Revealing a seal's secrets includes the clan's secrets and weaknesses, it's suicide. Elric held up 3 fingers, beginning to bargain, 3 days without messing around. Mephisto closed his eyes in refusal. Do you think you can humble my pride like that? Elric then held up 5 fingers, 5 days. Mephisto ground his teeth and snarled, you continue to insult me. Elric, hearing that, shouted, "Fine then." Unexpectedly, Mephisto forced a fake smile and accepted the insulting offer, "But because my magnanimity is as vast as the sea, I'll let it slide this time." Elric teased him, all for 5 days without messing around. Immediately afterward Mephisto's voice returned to a serious tone. "Listen carefully, with the seal you currently have, forget about completing the quest, you won't even get near the Snow Mountain King." Elric looked up at him. "You are," Mephisto cut him off before he could finish. But he chuckled softly, that didn't mean there was no way. The scene shifted back to the millennia-old snowy mountains. Elric stood there, angrily complaining a few words, "Freezing to death, this is why I never come back." Before him were warriors with unfriendly gazes, but it seemed he had to use the hint Mephisto had given him. Elric leapt forward, remembering Mephisto's instruction, "Raise your achievement rank." Seals can be ranked common, enhanced, precious, unique, and legendary based on their rarity. There is also an achievement level that can lead to different power tiers even within the same rank. As Elric flew toward the warriors he tried to dodge their strikes. The Seal of Malice is precious and not trivial, but your achievement level is only 1 star. On the other hand, the Snow Mountain King's seal has been cultivated to 10 stars. Elric soon arrived before the leader, "So you must raise your achievement level to 10 stars or promote your rank to the first tier." At that thought Elric realized his current situation. His achievement level was only 1 star, and he smiled faintly. Immediately after, Elric delivered a powerful punch at his opponent. The blizzard grew ever thicker. Elric's feet were already buried deep in snow. Elric bowed his head and said coldly, "At last we meet, Snow Mountain King." He looked at the shadow ahead, thinking, "No matter how many warriors I've defeated, my achievement rank is stuck at 2 stars. In other words, do I have to face you to raise my rank?" But at that thought Elric swore in anger, "Damn." Before him loomed a colossal warrior, not a mere shadow but the full energy of a demon. What kind of being was he in life to be so powerful? Now terrified, Elric stammered to Otto, "You want me to defeat that?" Otto stood behind him, giving a thumbs up, "It's fine, you won't die." Elric asked again, "Is he truly an honored ancestor of our line? He isn't an implacable enemy of ours, is he?" The snow kept falling thicker. Elric told himself quietly that nevertheless he would give it a try. He warned himself it would be difficult, but if he kept trying, then his eyes gleamed with determination, he could certainly win. Mephisto on the side looked somewhat worried. Elric suddenly opened his eyes. The scene shifted back to that old library. Elric couldn't help but laugh. "After gathering all the seals and working until you want to kick off your pants, you haven't even moved and you're dead flat." He lay still there. He wondered to himself how he could possibly win. Mephisto flew close to him. "So you understand now? Just abandon that quest." Elric kept speaking, as if he wasn't ready to give up, "But if I obtain that entity's seal." Hearing that, Mephisto trembled with anger, "That bastard is at it again." He sat up and continued, "Oh right, this is a bit abrupt. The Snow Mountain King is female, right?" Then he stared straight at Mephisto, expecting an answer from him. Mephisto met his gaze. Then he turned his face away. A second later Mephisto pointed at his face and shouted, "Why are you looking at me like that? You, what's with your eyes? You." Seeing that, Elric thought to himself, "I get it, there's something between the Snow Mountain King and Mephisto. I'll uncover it slowly." Elric gripped a polished stone in his hand. Right now the more important thing was to swallow the Snow Mountain King's egg, even though he still didn't know how. But he decided to keep it safe, telling himself he'd figure it out later, if he could beat the creature to the brink of death.